Present us, O Lord, in all our doings with thy most gracious favor, and further us with thy continued help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in thee, we may glorify thy holy name, and finally, by thy mercy, attain everlasting life. Amen. I'd like to inform the Assembly that Danielle Humble-Sillinger, one of our procedural clerks, is participating in a professional development program with the table officers and will be periodically at the table throughout the session. So please join me in welcoming Danielle to the chamber. Introduction of guests. I recognize the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce a gentleman well known to members of the Assembly, Dr. Larry Rosia, who is sitting in your gallery this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, as all members know, Dr. Rosia is the President and CEO of Saskatchewan Polytechnic. Mr. Speaker, last night, Dr. Rosia and Sask Polytechnic hosted an MLA reception here in the Legislature. It was a great opportunity to hear about all the great things that Saskatchewan Polytechnic has to offer our students across Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, our throne speech last week highlighted the preliminary work being done and our commitment to support the Saskatchewan Polytechnic's Saskatoon Campus Renewal Project. Mr. Speaker, we have a growing economy, and the great work that Dr. Rosie and his team at Sask Polytechnic are doing will ensure that we have a skilled and trained workforce ready to support that growth. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Dr. Rosia and Saskatchewan Polytechnic for their contribution to ensuring that everyone who wants to upskill or reskill to take advantage of our growing economy and the opportunities that come with that, Mr. Speaker, then that's growth that works for everyone. Mr. Speaker, we'll be hearing a little bit more about Saskatchewan Polytechnic in a couple of minutes, but Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask all members of the Assembly to welcome Dr. Rosia to his Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the official opposition, I would also like to echo the minister's welcome to Dr. Rosia. My colleagues and I so enjoyed your presentation last night, meeting some of your colleagues and, of course, your student who presented to us. What impressive work that's coming out of Sask Polytechnic, and I can't say how excited I am to have the new Saskatoon campus joining my riding of Saskatoon University. It will be a pleasure to see that innovation corridor realized, and thank you for your continued work over 35 years in the education sector that Dr. Rosia has spent, and we welcome him here today. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Martensville-Warman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to welcome a gentleman that I've been very fortunate to have gotten to know over the past year and a half or so. Seated in your gallery this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, is Tony Stevenson. Tony, you can give us a wave, say hello. Tony's been touring our province, speaking to school students and at community halls around Saskatchewan about his residential school healing journey. I was fortunate enough to hear Tony in Martensville last September, and we've been staying in touch ever since. And I always enjoy the conversations we have, and they're very insightful. So, with Tony this afternoon, I'd also like to welcome his wife Marcy MacArthur, Tony's mother Lillian Stevenson, his sister Kathy Stevenson, and Marcy's sister Juanita MacArthur Big Eagle. So we've all had some time this morning in the building to visit and see the sites, and had lunch together and had some very good conversations. Looking forward to meeting up with you following question period. So at this time, I'd like to invite all members to join me in welcoming Tony, Marcy, Lillian, Kathy, and Juanita to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to join with the member opposite in welcoming Tony and the other guests who've joined us in the Speaker's Gallery. Thank you for sharing your story with students around this province. As the education critic for the official opposition, as a former teacher who's on leave from the classroom, say thank you on behalf of students, teachers, and families in this province, so that our young people can continue with all of us on this journey, starting with truth towards reconciliation. Thank you and welcome here.
You're here.
Recognize the Minister of Policing and Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you and to all members of this Assembly, I'd like to introduce 23 grade 5 students from Acole White City School. Accompanying them today is their teacher, Tyra Hossa. The parent chaperones are Nicole Posham and Laurel Desito. I'd like to welcome all of you to your assembly here today, and I look forward to a discussion later on. Thank you.
Here, here.
Recognize the member from Yorkton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with my colleague, the Minister of Corrections, in welcoming the school group to their Legislative Assembly. Tyra, actually, when I was Minister of Rural and Remote Health, worked in my office. She kept me in line for a couple of good years. And actually, Tyra, I still have that nice card, that thank you card that you made for me. It's still pinned up in my office. So I want to join with the Minister in welcoming Tyra and her class to their Legislative Assembly as well. And while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I want to introduce some guests that I have, a few of them that I have introduced before, and a couple new ones, Mr. Speaker. With us in your gallery this afternoon is Tim Schindel. He is the founder and national director of Leading Influence Ministries, and his wife, Barb, Mr. Speaker. And he's got Sask roots. He's now in Victoria, BC, but as many would in the building and in the Assembly know, he runs a chaplaincy program, a support for elected officials and staff members as well, right across the country in a sort of different provinces. So we're just so thankful for the work that they do there. With him beside Tim is Pastor Fred Hill, our chaplain right here for Leading Influence Ministries. Serves us so well in this building, and our constituency assistants and other members and workers in the building as well, Mr. Speaker. And with them a special guest from Manitoba. I understand she has some Saskatchewan roots as well. But lost her name here. Oh, I shouldn't. Where are we here? Renee Coleman. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Renee Coleman is the chaplain for the Manitoba Legislature. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask all members to welcome them to their Legislative Assembly. And I know a number of members here today will be attending the Leading Influence Ministries prayer breakfast tomorrow at Connexus Arts Centre in the morning, hosted by our own Fred Hill. So I ask all members to welcome them to our and their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to join with the member opposite again in welcoming our guests, Tim, Renee, and Fred. I can't see you from where I'm sitting here, but I can see you when I'm on my feet. Welcome here. You know, I have had a chance to meet with both Fred and Tim and to pray together in my office. Looking forward to joining you tomorrow at the breakfast and to joining together in fellowship around those tables. Welcome here to the Saskatchewan Legislature and to your Assembly. Thank you for being here.
Here.
Recognize the Minister of Rural and Remote Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to introduce a guest seated in the West Gallery, in the far end of one of the benches there, a friend of mine for a number of years, Philip Entz from the Abbey Hutterite Colony. Phil has been a long time a friend of mine on political issues, a source of advice and information, and a lot of questions that I think I probably don't get a chance to answer all of them, Phil. I try my best. But always glad to see Phil. He's always very engaged in the political discourse here in this province, and I know this is not his first time to the legislature. He's been here before, but it's always great to see a friend from Southwest Saskatchewan here in his legislative assembly. So through you and to you, would ask all members to welcome Philip Entz to his assembly.
Here, here.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the minister opposite to welcome Philip to his assembly. It's a pleasure to have Philip here. I've gotten to know him over a number of years. He certainly has lots of advice and very good questions. And out of the Abbey Colony, they know a lot about agriculture, and they care a lot about this province as well. It's a real honor to say hello to my friend Philip here today.
Presenting petitions. Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to be on my feet today to present a petition to the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan calling for an increase to the personal care home benefit. The folks who signed this petition today want to bring to our attention that personal care homes offer essential services for older adults, resulting in decreased strain on the healthcare services in Saskatchewan and lowered healthcare expenses overall. They want us to know that the increased cost of living in this province has created stresses both for low-income, well, for all seniors, especially those on a fixed income, but in particular for low-income seniors who depend on supports to get the care that they need, but also creates strain on the providers for personal care home operators in Saskatchewan. The $2,000 threshold from 10 years ago is no longer adequate to cover the average cost of personal care, which now often exceeds $3,000 and is most often between $3,500 to $4,500. And that the threshold of $2,000 for personal care home leaves most low-income seniors without additional funds that they need to pay for the other things that they need to live healthy and fulfilling lives. Mr. Speaker, I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to increase the personal care home benefit to a threshold that fully reflects the true cost of living in a Saskatchewan personal care home. I do so present.
Recognize the member from Regina University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to be on my feet today to present a petition to the Legislative Assembly calling for the funding of in vitro fertilization treatments here in Saskatchewan. As members in this House have heard many times, 1 in 6 couples in Canada experience infertility, and this is a medical condition. And despite public health care being a right here in Canada, there is no funding available for individuals or couples requiring IVF or fertility treatments in Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, the signatories of this petition believe that Saskatchewan people's ability to grow their families should not depend on their socioeconomic status, and that investing in people trying to build families here in this province makes economic sense. Other provinces in Saskatchewan in Canada have created programs that financially assist in providing IVF treatments to those struggling to conceive, because as we all know, each cycle can cost upwards of $10,000, which does not include the cost of drugs. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Government of Saskatchewan immediately move to cover the financial burden of 2 rounds of IVF treatments for Saskatchewan people experiencing infertility. Mr. Speaker, the signatories of this petition today reside in Birch Hills and Prince Albert. I do so submit.
Reading and receiving petitions, member statements. I recognize the member from Saskatoon-Utana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than 40 years ago, a group of people worked together to kickstart the Steep Hill Food Co-op, a not-for-profit alternative to chain grocery stores located in my riding of Saskatoon-Utana. The goal 40 years ago was to provide the community with accessible, locally sourced and nutritious food at a reasonable price. Today, their goal remains the same, to provide high-quality, organic and local food at fair prices. While the opportunities for people to find organic and local food in their communities has increased, Steep Hill remains a vibrant part of the Broadway area and a staple in our community. Steep Hill Co-op has made changes over the years, making it easier for people to shop with extended hours and increasing the variety of products they carry, all while preserving their core values and remaining a cooperative. They have become increasingly important in the community with the closure of our neighbourhood chain grocery store. And while big chain grocery stores continue to move out of local neighbourhoods, it is even more important to support local community-based food stores in our communities, who in turn support our local growers and producers. Thank you to Steep Hill Food Co-op for for being a huge part of our community for the past 40 years. Here, here.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon, Willow Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have good news about the future of our province's young people. Last night, the legislature had the privilege of hosting senior leaders, students and alumni from Saskatchewan Polytechnique. Sask Polytech plays a critical role in preparing students for rewarding careers in our province. With 15,000 students served per year, Sask Polytech is producing our future. Sask Polytech's reputation as a first-class technical school continues to grow around the world. An increase of 25.6% in international recruitment, Mr. Speaker, highlights this reputation. Mr. Speaker, student and employer surveys from Sask Polytech show that 94% of Indigenous graduates have a job within 6 months to a year, and 92% of employers would hire a Sask Polytech grad again. When our post-secondary institutions are on track, we are too, Mr. Speaker. Our government understands the value of high-quality post-secondary education. It is the foundation for a skilled, responsive labour force and a healthy, growing economy. As you heard in last week's throne speech, this government is committed to advancing work on Sask Polytech's Saskatoon Campus Renewal Project. We are excited about this necessary project located in the vicinity of the University of Saskatchewan and Innovation Place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the Police and Peace Officer Memorial Service for fallen members, which took place this September, which I attended along with the Minister. The commemorative event allowed the public a formal opportunity to express their appreciation for the service of police and peace officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. This year's event featured members of various police services in Saskatchewan taking part in the Ride to Remember, an annual bike ride in memory of those officers lost in the line of duty. The Ride to Remember started at the Saskatoon Police Service on September 22nd, with participants on their motorcycles stopping in Humboldt, Manitou Lake, Moose Jaw, and finally making their way here to Regina on September 25th. The participants rode a total of 447 kilometers of highway before reaching Regina for the parade of officers, marching down Albert Street Bridge to the Legislative Building for speeches and a wreath-laying ceremony. Mr. Speaker, I ask that all members join me in recognizing the Police and Peace Officer Memorial Service and in remembering all of our fallen officers. The event was an important tribute and show of remembrance for those lost either in the line of duty or to struggles with mental health.
Here, here.
Recognize the member from Regina Pasqua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 new geriatricians have been recruited to Saskatchewan to help improve health care for seniors. Dr. Lucas Dybal, Dr. Kelsey Charnowski, both born and raised in Saskatchewan, have recently set up practice in geriatric medicine in Regina. Mr. Speaker, our government values the role of geriatricians play in supporting the care and well-being of older adults, and we welcome these 2 new doctors with open arms. As a physician working with the specialized team, they treat older patients who have complex or aging-related medical needs. This can include cognitive decline, frailty, osteoporosis, a decline in mobility, as well as many other medical or quality of life issues. With the addition of Dr. Dybal and Dr. Charnowski, the geriatric resources team in Regina is now fully staffed and serving residents in southern Saskatchewan. In partnership with SHA, our government continues to address physician recruitment across the province, including recruiting Saskatchewan graduates, our Canadian graduates, and internationally trained physicians. Mr. Speaker, both Dr. Dybal and Dr. Charnowski are greatly valued and appreciated. I ask all my fellow members to join me in welcoming them back to Saskatchewan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Cherry River Valley.
Go get him, Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, I had the pleasure of joining the Premier at the official sod turning of the new kindergarten to grade 12 school in my hometown, Carrot River. The government of Saskatchewan is investing $25.7 million into this project, which will see the old elementary and high schools combined into a brand new state-of-the-art learning environment for approximately 400 kindergarten to grade 12 students. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to let you know that construction is already underway. Together with the contributions from the community, Mr. Speaker, Carrot River's new school will include a new welding lab and larger performing arts or gymnasium area for all the students to enjoy. Whereas the NDP have a legacy of closing down schools in our province, Mr. Speaker, it's great to see our government continuing to invest in our education system. This is just one of 20 ongoing new school builds or major renovations currently underway in the province. I'd say that's growth that works for everyone, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the community of Carrot River, I would like to thank the Government of Saskatchewan and the Northeast School Division for their leadership in providing this important investment in our community and the next generation. Go Wildcats!
Recognize a member from Athabasca.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On October 14th and 15th, Northern Health and Wellness Days took place in Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, with the help of students from the University of Regina, the Saskatchewan Polytechnic, over 167 community members from La Loche, Clearwater River Dene Nation, and Buffalo Narrows walked away with fresh smiles. A total of 57 volunteers helped to bring $87,000 of free dental work in the North. This included routine cleanings, extractions, exams, restorations, and further education on oral care. Mr. Speaker, dental health is more than just physically important to your well-being. Having a good smile to greet yourself with in the morning can help you feel significantly better emotionally and mentally. Thank you to all the volunteers from Sask Polytech, the University of Regina, Northern Intertribal Health Authority, the Saskatchewan Health Authority, Saskatchewan Dental Hygiene Association, Saskatchewan Dental Therapists Association, and the dental health professional volunteers who help run the clinics in the 3 northern communities. Thank you also to Cameco for presenting Northern Health and Wellness Days to bring awareness to Northern health care. And further, thank you to Sinclair Dental for donating supplies, equipment, and one of their technicians for a weekend focus on helping the North smile a little brighter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Kindersley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, our province had the opportunity to host a diplomatic economic mission with delegates and representatives from 30 different countries. This was an important opportunity for Saskatchewan to highlight our many advantages to our trade partners. The representatives toured several locations in Regina and Saskatoon. In Regina, the mission visited the Legislative Building, the Cultivator Tech Incubator Facility, along with Cambites Farms and Purely Canada Foods Terminals. Some other highlighted locations include our University of Regina, the International Carbon Capture and Storage Knowledge Centre, Petroleum Technology Research Centre, the SRC Diamond Laboratory, as well as rare earth and vital metals and Cheetah resource facilities. Mr. Speaker, our province is internationally recognized for the 3 Fs, the food, the fertilizer, and the fuel that the world needs. Trade missions like this strengthen our place on the world stage and affirm our status as a national leader in economic growth. This mission included representatives from Argentina, Brunei, the European Union, Kuwait, Lithuania, Rwanda, South Africa, Spain, and many more nations. Our government looks forward to working with these trade partners in the future and providing them with the resources necessary to tackle the ever-growing needs of a modern world. Thank you.
Question carried. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, our healthcare system is in crisis. No family doctors currently taking patients in Saskatoon. Tens of thousands waiting for surgeries. Hospitals shuttered across the province, and doctors are closing up shop, leaving for greener pastures. Yet we have a health minister who likes to think that everything is fine and that there's nothing wrong with the system. A simple question to the Premier. Does he agree with his minister that there's nothing wrong with the system?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think there's no doubt that across the nation of Canada, including in the province of Saskatchewan, we are seeing a very challenging time in our healthcare systems, Mr. Speaker, across the board. After 2 very challenging years of facing a global pandemic and doing so together, Mr. Speaker. That is why you've seen these 2 ministers of health in Saskatchewan come forward with the most ambitious health human resource action plan in the nation, Mr. Speaker, a plan to recruit folks from abroad and from within the province, to retain those folks in our healthcare system, to offer those services, to incentivize them and to train more, Mr. Speaker. Now with nearly 1,000 nursing seats here in the province. You've seen premiers come together across this nation asking for the federal government to be a full funding partner in the Canada Health Transfer, Mr. Speaker. I'd put forward that the NDP nationally has a role to play in that as they're propping up this federal government. It should have been part of their resource supply agreement that they had, Mr. Speaker. It was not. Dental care was the Canada Health Transfer, of which we are all beneficiaries are, Mr. Speaker. And so I'd ask the Leader of the Opposition, the new Leader of the Opposition, with her strong relationship with the federal leader, has she asked the federal leader to advocate for a full funding partner in the federal government in the Canada Health Transfer?
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, 15 years in government, that Premier should know that this is a problem that existed long before COVID, and he should have more than just a plan to make a plan. Now, in September, our health critic and our critic for the status of women were in Meadow Lake. You'll remember that they were joined by Kendall Carlberg. And Kendall was forced to deliver her baby on the side of the road because the hospital in Meadow Lake was so short-staffed. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, a woman in labour sent over 200 kilometres away to Lloydminster. Not surprisingly, she didn't make it. Now, luckily, she and her baby were okay. But I want to know, does the Premier honestly think that this is acceptable?
Recognize the Premier.
These are precisely the healthcare challenges that we are faced with, not only in Saskatchewan, but across the nation of Canada. And I really think it puts forward the importance of having a very ambitious health human resource recruitment plan, a plan that is going to rectify some of the challenges that we have, at least here in this province, Mr. Speaker. The most ambitious plan that I have seen in Canada is right here in the province of Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, we saw the Minister of Finance, the Deputy Premier, Mr. Speaker, put $60 million of provincial money behind that plan to ensure that we can recruit folks in, well, if we want to talk about debt, Mr. Speaker, there is $1 billion of debt that is being repaid this year, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the most ambitious health human resource plan in the province, Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, we're building new hospital in the community of Prince Albert, the community of Weyburn, urgent care centres here in Regina and Saskatoon, Mr. Speaker. The commitment of this government since 2007 when it comes to the conversation of not only building new facilities but staffing those facilities, Mr. Speaker, has been sound. We'll stand on our record in this province, Mr. Speaker. We have the most ambitious health human resource plan in the nation of Canada. We're putting it into action, and we're going to see people landing into those facilities this calendar year, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he can bellow it, but that government is in no position to talk about debt, and if they continue to stick their heads in the sand and think that their plan is adequate, we're going to continue to see doctors leave this province for greener pastures like British Columbia. Mr. Speaker, we live in the birthplace of Medicare, and we have babies being delivered on the side of the road, and that Premier should be ashamed. And today, expectant mothers in this province are in exactly the same position, because in Meadow Lake, a community of over 5,000, they're not able to provide routine maternal care because they are so short of nurses. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, is this government asking expectant mothers to plan ahead, to predict when they're going to deliver. It is ludicrous. What is the Premier's plan to get those much-needed services back up and running in Meadow Lake?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, most certainly we have had interruptions, temporary interruptions across the province in various communities, including, quite frankly, this past weekend in the community where I live as well, Mr. Speaker. And yes, the Leader of the Opposition is right, and many of these interruptions are due to a shortage of nurses, predominantly RN nurses, Mr. Speaker. That's why in the last 15 years we've over doubled the number of training seats that we have for RNs, nurses of all designations here in the province, Mr. Speaker. That's why we are actively recruiting additional health professionals of all designations, Mr. Speaker, but in particular RNs and nurses in the Philippines today. There will be a delegation that will be on the ground in the weeks ahead, Mr. Speaker, to advance that delegation and that immigration effort, Mr. Speaker. That's why we have over 100 positions that have been prioritized with incentives in hard-to-recruit or long-time open positions, Mr. Speaker, in places like, for example, Meadow Lake, potentially, where we are having long-term challenges with recruitment, Mr. Speaker. And most certainly, we are working hard to retain the nurses of all designations in this province with one of the best remuneration packages in the country of Canada.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier suggests this is a temporary disruption. The people in Meadow Lake have been without obstetrical services for a year. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this is not an isolated incident either. Maternal care has been unavailable in Yorkton, in Swift Current, in Estevan over the recent months. No expectant parent should be in a position of not knowing whether or where they can safely deliver their child. And meanwhile, in Alacross, over the weekend, there were no emergency services available. And guess where, Mr. Speaker? Those patients were being diverted to Meadow Lake. In every corner of this province, patients are being bounced around and diverted to other hospitals because services aren't available or they're closed altogether. Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party has broken rural health care. The people of this province want to know, what is your plan to fix it?
Recognize the Premier.
Service disruptions temporary because that is what they are. This is a government. Health ministers and everyone sitting on this side of the House are absolutely committed, Mr. Speaker, to ensuring that those services are retained and regained back into each of those communities where we're seeing these temporary disruptions, unlike, I might add, the government previous, Mr. Speaker, that took the opportunity to close those hospitals in community after community. Mr. Speaker, we have, as I've said a number of times in this Assembly today and on previous days, the most ambitious health human resource plan in the nation of Canada. We're seeing service disruptions in other provinces, in NDP, BC, for example. We're seeing it in Alberta. We're seeing it in Manitoba. We're seeing this discussion in Ontario, Quebec, and across our nation from coast to coast, Mr. Speaker. I'm confident that the plan that the health ministers have put in place to retain, to recruit, to train, Mr. Speaker, and to incentivize folks into our province, first of all, and into our healthcare centres is going to show extremely tangible results in the next number of weeks. This calendar year, Mr. Speaker, it's been funded by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the people of the province. And, Mr. Speaker, we're going to put it into action in the weeks ahead.
Hear, hear. Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, after days of national and international headlines, the Premier finally apologized for the shameful throne speech invitation that was sent to Colin Thatcher. And while he apologized for his role, the Minister of Corrections and Policing, who defended the decision on Wednesday, wouldn't face reporters yesterday. Will the Minister of Corrections and Policing stand in her place today and apologize for her ridiculous comments last week justifying the invitation of Colin Thatcher?
I recognize the Minister of Corrections, Policing, Public Safety and Firearms Secretariat.
As the Premier stated yesterday, and on behalf of the government, he offered an unequivocal apology, and I share in this apology. This subject being invited and being present at this legislature sent the wrong message. And I absolutely support the Premier's statement yesterday. Last week, I was asked about this subject's presence, and I responded. I responded without considering the implications that this invitation would have. The member who invited this subject should have used better judgment. The subject should never have been invited to this legislature. And I'll answer another question as we go forward.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Glad to hear that, Mr. Speaker. Let's recap what the minister said about Colin Thatcher's visit last week. Quote, "It doesn't matter. He has a right to be here just like anybody else. He is a free citizen." Mr. Speaker, he's not. He's on parole for the rest of his life for killing Joanne Wilson. Mr. Speaker, what was the minister thinking when she defended Colin Thatcher so enthusiastically last week?
Recognize the Minister of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important to clarify that my comments were in no way defending this subject or his reprehensible actions. What he did was horrific and wrong on so many levels. As a former police officer, I was an investigator in interpersonal violence unit and child abuse unit. I know from first-hand experience, up close and personal, Mr. Speaker, the horrors and tragedies that survivors of domestic and interpersonal violence face each and every day. As such, I will continue, as I have, to fight to ensure their safety and well-being. I will continue to work every day to address the issues that matter to the people of Saskatchewan, increasing public safety, reducing gang-related violence, including gun, drug, and human trafficking, Mr. Speaker, and of course, continuing to increase our efforts on domestic and interpersonal violence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, Joanne Dussel, who leads the Provincial Association of Transition Houses, said, quote, "What we shouldn't be doing is bringing someone with that history to a place of privilege, a place of power." She went on, quote, "It's an honor, you know, to be invited to the throne speech, and to honor someone who's committed so heinous an act is just really so unfortunate," end quote. Mr. Speaker, why did it take the minister so long to realize how offensive and harmful those comments are to survivors of intimate partner violence? Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Corrections, Policing and Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with Ms. Duzel's comments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, when apologies aren't followed through with meaningful action, they become worthless. Saskatchewan is one of only 2 provinces that doesn't provide operational funding for second-stage shelters for survivors of intimate partner violence. Enough with the dialogue, enough with the consultations. Mr. Speaker, these shelters provide life-saving support to survivors and their children. Will the Sask Party finally follow up their words with real action and commit to operational funding for second-stage shelters today?
Recognize the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is part of a whole wraparound discussion about bottom line preventing and lowering rates of interpersonal violence. Mr. Speaker, legislatively, we have undertaken substantial action on human trafficking, on Clare's Law. We were leaders, Mr. Speaker. In terms of investment, $25 million this year on interpersonal violence supports. And I have a list here, Mr. Speaker. New shelter facility, new acquired renovated second-stage housing, improved shelters, Mr. Speaker. Regina Transition House, PA Safe Shelter for Women, YWCA Isabel Johnson Shelter, Saskatoon Interval House, Southwest Safe Shelter, Project Safe Haven, Shelwyn House, Mr. Speaker. That the 2019 Women's Shelter Canada report identified that across Canada, affordable housing was hard to find. 8% of the time in Saskatchewan, it was much higher, 85% of the time across the rest of the country, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the member from Regina Douglas Park.
Speaker, survivors of intimate partner violence and those who are doing this good work at the shelters are sick They're sick and tired of getting the runaround from this government on this very specific issue. This is a simple yes or no question, Mr. Speaker, and we can't seem to get a decent answer out of this government. Will the Sask Party finally follow up their words with real action and commit to operational funding for second-stage shelters today?
Recognize the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
As I said, this is about a wraparound support system for bringing down these rates. They're too high in Saskatchewan, they're too high across the country, and of course, we are looking at second-stage housing, the models that can work and fit best within the systems we have. Mr. Speaker, we are having those conversations, we are talking to those organizations, and I can guarantee you all the time, this is an important issue, and we're going to get it right in terms of the organizations that are the best fit and the best complement for the structures we have in place right now, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here.
Recognize the member from Regina University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, those members have been having conversations and listening for years. The time for action was yesterday, and since they didn't take it, it's today. Right. You know, speaking of this government's record, let's speak very plainly, Mr. Speaker. The Sask Party is bad at creating jobs. Hear, hear. In the last 10 years, under their watch, Atlantic Canada, Mr. Speaker, Atlantic Canada created full-time jobs at a rate 13 times faster than here in Saskatchewan. 13 times. And this is a government that acts like it's a red-letter day when they come in second last. Heck, they throw themselves a press conference to pat themselves on the back for being 9th out of 10. The "hey, at least we beat somebody" trophy case is overflowing over there. So, Mr. Speaker, to the government, what is the plan to create good, paying, full-time jobs here in Saskatchewan? Is there a plan? Here, here.
Recognize the Minister of Trade and Export Development.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I really do not know what fantasy world the NDP live in. Everybody in this province knows that this economy is performing very well, except for the members opposite, who take every opportunity to talk down the economy, to attack job creators, to attack companies that are creating jobs. People know what their record is, Mr. Speaker, and people also know that the challenge we have in front of us is a labour shortage, Mr. Speaker. That's what this government is working very hard to address. We're going to have some very exciting announcements that we've been working on with our partners in the private sector on this going forward, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is that we have the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that more people moved to this province in the last quarter than in the history of records being kept on population movements, Mr. Speaker. Those are the realities. They can try and deny them all they want. They can try and talk down the economy all they want. The reality is, as everybody in this province knows, is this economy is performing very, very well.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the member from Regina University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, gushing about the unemployment rate when the only reason it's so low is because 6,000 people fled this province under that government's leadership in the last quarter. But, Mr. Speaker, you know, even our sputtering population growth seriously outpaces job growth. Our sluggish, sad population growth under this government outpaces full-time job growth 10-1. So, Mr. Speaker, again, does the Sask Party have a plan to create good-paying, full-time jobs?
Recognize the Minister of Trade and Export Development.
My goodness, Mr. Speaker, I really do not know what part of reading the Statistics Canada report they missed. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, the fact, more people moved to this province in the last quarter than in the history of this province. More people, in fact, Mr. Speaker, more people moved to this province in the last quarter, meaning the last 3 months, Mr. Speaker, than in the history of their government, Mr. Speaker. That is a absolute fact. And the reason why people are moving here, Mr. Speaker, is because they have economic opportunities. One of the industries moving forward, for example, Mr. Speaker, the nuclear sector, some incredibly exciting news that we had in this space. Cameco, one of our marquee companies here in this province, Saskatchewan-based, Saskatchewan-led, acquiring Westinghouse Electric, an iconic nuclear company, Mr. Speaker, based in the United States. This would never have happened under the NDP, Mr. Speaker. Here, Mr. Speaker, let me read you their actual party policy, Mr.
Next question. I recognize the member from Cumberland.
Yesterday, the FSIN and the Health Quality Council released a new report. It shows that from 2000 to 2020, suicide rates for First Nations people were almost 4 times higher than the rest of the province. They're calling for this government to partner, to provide funding, and to save lives. When will this government act on this latest report on the suicide crisis in our province?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We appreciate the efforts of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations as well as the Health Quality Council on this report that was provided yesterday, Mr. Speaker. It's important and integral for us as government, for all of us across Saskatchewan, to make sure that we continue to build these relationships right across the communities in our province, and that includes our First Nations and Métis partners as well, Mr. Speaker. And we're doing some good work on this initiative, Mr. Speaker. Addressing self-harm and suicide are, of course, paramount for this government. It's why in this year's budget we're investing $2.25 million into these sorts of initiatives when it comes to suicide prevention. That also includes specifically, Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget, $500,000 specifically designated to work on initiatives in partnership with our partners at the FSIN, and we're going to continue to do that good work with our partners there now and into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Cumberland.
People are dying, Mr. Speaker. We need more than words, we need action. The report found that there was a 30% increase in the number of First Nations women and girls who had to go to the hospital because of self-harm. There was a 20% increase for First Nations men and boys. Things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. Will the minister listen to families, come up with a plan that will save lives?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as Minister, I have been listening to families since the spring session of the Legislature, visiting communities around this province, including in the member's own constituency, to talk to families firsthand and right across this province about this very important issue. Mr. Speaker, of the $500,000 I spoke of earlier when it comes to funding for the FSIN for suicide prevention initiatives, we have provided, it's my understanding that the FSIN offered a camp here earlier this fall, a land-based wellness camp for Indigenous youth, of which $212,000 was used for that particular program. That's some good work. It's been done by the FSIN, and we're proud to be a partner in that. There's still obviously some funds that are remaining as per the $500,000 in this year's budget that we allocated towards the FSIN. We're going to continue to work with our partners at the FSIN to allocate those remaining funds for more good initiatives such as this one, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Cumberland.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't just an issue in northern communities. This is an issue all across Saskatchewan. First Nations people live in the north, they live in the south, they live in the big cities, on reserve, and in small communities too. From 2016 to 2020, there were almost 2,000 First Nations people in the hospital because of self-harm. Will the minister finally listen to families and put the supports in place with a real plan that saves lives?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there are a number of significant initiatives that we're advancing as part of our suicide prevention and mental health supports, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, $500,000 for the FSIN, some of which has been used towards a land-based wellness camp for Indigenous youth with the FSIN that occurred earlier this fall. And we continue to work with the FSIN on how we're going to spend the remaining dollars on these types of initiatives, Mr. Speaker. We have funded programs such as the wellness camp at Musqueam Lake in the Pine House area of the province as well, as an example. example of some funding that is provided to that particular community on a one-time basis. Mr. Speaker, we announced earlier this fall a partnership with the Takakoo Cree Nation with respect to our First Nation with respect to the urgent care centre will be built in Saskatoon. We have partnerships with groups like the Saskatoon Tribal Council, not only on a mental health awareness bus that provides supports across that community in Saskatoon, Mr. Speaker, but also new funding in this year's budget for a mental health van that supports the STC's pilot on mental health intervention for First Nations families and youth in the city of Saskatoon. Those are just examples of some of the actions we're undertaking, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to do that good work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Ministerial. Oh, why is the Government House Leader on his feet?
A point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Your point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During question period, the member for Saskatoon Fairview said, and I'm sure it was caught on the microphones during the answers by one of the members opposite, quote, just because you say it doesn't make it true, and also, quote, that's not true. Obviously, these are unparliamentary terms. I'd call on the member to withdraw and apologize.
Is the member from Regina Douglas Park?
Mr. Speaker, I was paying close attention to the Premier's response in the dialogue he was having with the Leader of the Opposition. I did not hear this member make those statements. I'd ask that you review the record and make a ruling, Mr. Speaker.
No, I heard that, and I'll rule on it right away. It's, I mean, in the context she said it, it's debatable, first of all, and she didn't call a member saying the member was untrustworthy or saying that he was a liar. So it's all relevant. I mean, as we've talked before, sometimes these things are just on the line. Your point of order is not well taken. Ministerial statements. Introduction of bills.
Item number 1, Honourable Ms. Eyre.
I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill number 88, the Saskatchewan First Act, be now introduced and read a first time.
It has been moved by the Minister of Justice that Bill number 88 be now introduced and read a first time. It is the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried.
First reading of this bill.
When shall the bill be read a second time? I recognize the Minister of Justice.
Next sitting of the Assembly, Mr. Speaker.
Sitting. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. I recognize the Deputy Chair of House Services.
Mr. Speaker, I have been instructed by the Standing Committee on House Services to present its 9th report. I move that the 9th report of the Standing Committee on House Services be now concurred in.
The member has moved the motion that the 9th report of the Standing Committee on House Services be now concurred in. Is the House ready for the question? Did you, what? Did I miss something? Yes? Okay. And is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. Orders of the day.
Special order, resume debate on the address and reply, moved by Mr. Myers, seconded by Mr. Lemeg, and the amendment moved by Ms. Mowat and seconded by Mr. Witherspoon. Mr. Gowdy.
I recommend member from Melford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the House, it's a privilege to give a response to the throne speech, and I just thought I'd maybe start off with a few comments about our Queen and finish off with some connections to the King. And so it was interesting, on September 4th, this province was shocked with some tragic news and quite unbelievable. That was in my constituency back where I'm from, James Smith and Weldon's just outside. But Mr. Speaker, I had some opportunity to spend time with the chiefs over the last month, Wally Burns, Robert Head, and Calvin Sanderson, with their elders and with their knowledge keepers, with their counselors, and it's been very impressive, as I mentioned last night, to see how they showed how to lead. And Mr. Speaker, it was a very interesting day on the 8th of that same month. The Premier and I were sitting in a teepee just outside of the school at James Smith, and as we sat on the ground with their different chiefs, and I believe the member from Saskatoon Centre was there as well, and our Premier had the opportunity to describe why he was there. Why are you at the reserve with the elders and the chiefs, as they described how they were going to support their people? And I remember very clearly the statement that he made. And he said, "I am here to support you as you serve your people." While we were sitting in that teepee, someone came to the door, and it was an Oskapowis, which means helper in Cree. And he opened the tent flap, and while we were just leaving, he had said, "The Queen just died." It was a very somber moment. We had seen tragedy on the reserve, and now we'd lost our beloved Queen. It was just a very surreal time. And I remember driving away from the reserve that day, and the Premier looked over and he said, "Gowdy, we are going to send out all the appropriate ministers at the right time to James Smith, and we're going to work with the people there, and we're going to help James Smith as they move forwards." So, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't so long ago when the Minister of Government Relations, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and the Minister of Corrections and Policing came out to James Smith to sit down with the leadership of that community, as well as the MLA, the member from Athabasca, and we had a wonderful conversation. But you know, the statement has been made that we got to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. Nothing like this should ever happen again. Mr. Speaker, that's beyond our control. But I think that as we look at growth that works for everyone, we need to acknowledge the strength of having a strong economy and the growth of our economy, but we also need to look at the social strength that's needed in Saskatchewan these days. Mr. Speaker, when we drove away and the Premier made a promise through me to the people of James Smith that we want to commit to work with them as a government moving forwards to strengthen and support their people. Mr. Speaker, the theme of this speech was strength and growth that benefits everyone. In my constituency, I don't know what it's like across the way there, but I've got a big problem with growth in some ways. There's growing pains that come from the growth that's expanded so quickly. I don't know if they'd heard, but BHP under this government, and I think it was the member from Regina University, I hate to quote you quite often, but you're so quotable. You know, I think you had said that it's a tired, old, recycled throne speech. And, you know, I have a good friend who helps me get, you know, certain places in life. He says, "Gowdy, what we need to do is make a plan, stick to the plan, and execute the plan." And, you know, when you look at this government on this side of the House, we make a plan based on our guiding principles. We stick to that plan and we execute the plan. Our Premier and our Trade and Export Minister and others have gone overseas, and in Saskatchewan, and just in my little constituency area, the 4 RMs that line up with Melfort actually, there is no way that we can consume all the food we grow there. Absolutely no way. Zero. There's no way that Saskatchewan can consume all the food that we produce there. And that is just the beginning. Mr. Speaker, they've gone overseas and found markets for all the things that we produce. BHP committed to investing billions of dollars. They drilled a 1 kilometer route to grow from in the Jansen Lake mine. And now they are building, looking for thousands of employees in that area, Mr. Speaker. We have a company in St. Brew, just outside of Melfort. Jerry Bourgault has invested a lot of his time and energy into building a company that now they employ 650 plus people in that little community. Mr. Speaker, they're looking for another 80 employees. Jansen is going to look for long-term in the Leroy area, 450 employees. And all of the spin-offs that from that, every mom and pop community business in my town are looking for 2 or 3 employees. And I just don't understand how it could be a tired, this is the kind of plan that we need to stick to, and we need to keep following this plan, executing this plan, because this is the kind of thing that works for all Saskatchewan people, Mr. Speaker. I do want to acknowledge, though, that with growth, there are growth pains. And in our community, we are short of workers. So we had our health minister, our rural health minister, send out his chief of staff to my community the other day to sit down with some of our docs and talk about doctor shortages. Unlike Kindersley, Melfort has 14 doctors, which is shocking. Wow, everybody complains there's not many. But there aren't even enough doctors in Melfort, a town of 7,000 with 14 doctors and a surgeon. Mr. Speaker, we're looking to, we got lots of good ones. But Mr. Speaker, with growth comes pains. And I just really think that we would have a little bit of patience from the people on the other side of the House, that we would work together as the province grows, as the province comes across some of these unintended consequences of hiring practices. We're looking at trying to incentivize getting more healthcare workers in rural Saskatchewan. But you know what an unintended consequence of that might be, Mr. Speaker, is that we may have a harder time employing those people that we lose to the healthcare in other places. We have problems, but they are good problems to have, Mr. Speaker. One of my kids had growth pains when she was little. At Mary, the rest of us are just Gaudies aren't gifted with the growth genes, all that. We're not very tall, but my daughter Mary, quite a tall girl, and I remember when she was a little girl, I called her Marnie Jane, and she was crying, "Dad, I'm having pains in my legs." And as a dad, I couldn't fix the growth pains, but I could sure comfort her in them. And Mr. Speaker, in this province, we have growing pains from a strong economy. But the other strength that we have, the other area of growth that we need to pursue and strengthen in this province is the social side. Mr. Speaker, it used to be in Saskatchewan, I heard people all across Canada, give me a Saskatchewan country boy, country girl, and I'll hire them. No question, don't need an interview. And that's the kind of thing that we're shooting for in Saskatchewan, strong families, strong communities. I just love to see some of the things that are going on in education, Mr. Speaker. I was thinking about it. If we want to strengthen families, somebody asked, what does strong families look like, Mr. Speaker? What does a strong family look like? Well, I would propose that one of the things I want to go to in this touching on the throne speech is the Archbishop of Canterbury's visit before September the 4th, before the tragedy. The Archbishop of Canterbury was in James Smith Reserve. And you know what he was there to do? He was there to apologize on behalf of the Anglican Church for the residential schools. And I wanted to be there for that. I was very interested to meet the Archbishop of Canterbury. I don't want to meet many public figures and really want to get a picture, but this is a guy I thought, I want to see this guy. And Minister of Agriculture, maybe not so much, but there was the Archbishop of Canterbury coming to James Smith, and I thought, I want to be there for 2 reasons. Because one, I want to witness this, because the church, and of which I was a minister for years, the church got things wrong. When we thought that we could take children away from their parents and pass on our values, beliefs, and our culture, and that would somehow do something good. And I watched as a man came from England to Canada to apologize to the people of James Smith, many of which I went with their children to school. And as I was waiting for that speech, I went around the gym in James Smith School, and I looked at those posters on the wall. And you know what was on those posters? It was a project. It was a school project. And children from that school were writing what makes them valuable, what makes them matter. And you know what it said on those posters? I matter because my mom and dad, they love me. I matter because my mom and dad care for me and we can play games at night. I love my mom and dad. I matter because my parents love me, and I love this one. We like to be silly together. But you know, these are just little children, and we're talking about what does a strong family look like? Well, a strong family to me looks like the home is supportive for the children. They are raising those children with character. Mr. Speaker, we took those children out of those homes, and we figured that we as a government could pass on values, beliefs, and cultures that were not theirs. And when I see some of the things that I'm hoping one day to see in our education system, I asked a lot of the vice presidents of Saskatchewan big companies, I said, what are you looking for in the education system, publicly funded education system? What do you want from it? And you know what it boiled down to? Knowledge and character. And maybe we could add to that skill. Knowledge, character, and skill. That's what we as citizens want to see from publicly funded education. Because when we have growing pains, Mr. Speaker, we want to see people to deal with those growing pains. Like there's some pretty tough things out there. I hear some of the complaints from across the way, but can you ever get rid of growing pains in times of growth? No, but you can absolutely do your best and trust the leadership of your province, the frontline workers, to massage through those very difficult times. We need growth. What's going to happen when we need, I phoned the head of Schulte, so Carnegos, the Borgos, the Warleys, the bikers, all sorts of families in my area have been investing money in Saskatchewan, in my part of the world, and those people are all looking for labor. They're looking for good labor with strong character, but they're also looking for now, what? Housing. And now they're looking for more doctors and more nurses. Is that a good problem? That's a good problem. But Mr. Speaker, a strong economy needs strong social fabric, which is strong families and strong communities. And I look forward to the day when a kid comes home with a note from school and the dad or the mom or the grandma or whoever it is asks, hey, Johnny, what did you learn in school today? I learned that you're the most important person in my life. I learned that I need to hear from you. What are my values? What's our family's culture? What are our beliefs? What do you want me to become when I grow up? Mr. Speaker, I wasn't going to mention it, but you know, I got a phone call yesterday when we were in this chamber from a girl who I picked up on the highway, just leaving this city. And I asked her, where are you going? And she said, Melfort or Saskatoon. I said, Melfort or Saskatoon? What in the world? Well, who do you know in Melfort? She gave me a name. We got halfway home, Mr. Speaker, and I realized she didn't have a home. And so I'm now phoning quick, and what am I going to do now? So I got an amazing wife, Mr. Speaker. Like, honestly, she's an amazing wife. And by the way, when it comes to the economy, where we need labor, we got 6 kids in the county. 2 of them are in the workplace, 2 are in college, and 2 are at home in K-12. So everybody else, you need to do your part. But, you know, there is this girl and myself driving down the road, and, you know, it's nighttime now. And she says, don't you listen to any music? And I said, well, I guess I could turn on some music. Oh, it'll probably be God stuff, hey? And I said, well, so I played my music, and you know, I looked over, and I was playing a song about some of the things that in my Father's house, there's a place for me. And I looked over, and there she was crying. And I looked away from the window, and she said, how would I play a song? And she played a song, something about Peter Pan. And looking up into the stars and having no one. And so I got to my house, Mr. Speaker, and I went in. I said, you wait in the car. And I said to my wife, would you mind? I picked up a hitchhiker and she's homeless. Would you mind if she stayed with us for a bit? And so my wife said, sure. And so I slept on the couch that night. But we found a place. God bless the strong economy. We got a guy, Travis McConaughey, he's got a bunch of rental houses in Melfort, and he had a place for her. But you know what? Yesterday she phoned me, Mr. Speaker, from prison. And she said, Todd, could you come and speak for me at my court date? I have no one. And here I was with all my buddies wearing our suits. I was so tempted just to leave. But you know what? Praise the Lord, I got a phone call this morning. She's getting out. She said, Todd, can you come pick me up? I said, well, exactly at the... But, Mr. Speaker, this girl, how did she get where she got? You know, she doesn't have a mom and a dad. She doesn't have a grandma. She doesn't have a support team. But I want to tell the people across the way and the guys on our side and girls on our side, we care about these people, but we know there's growth pains. We know there's difficulties, but we need a strong social fabric. We need a strong economy. And to finish off, I just want to say, you know, the king is going to be coronated. So one of the reasons why I wanted to see this, this Archbishop of Canterbury is, you know who stands between, who's above the king? You got the king, and then you got everybody else below the king. Who's above the king? I'd say God's above the king, but you know, the king's got a king, or the queen had a king. And so I watched the queen's coronation ceremony. I don't know if you know that, but the queen put the crown, or sorry, the Archbishop of Canterbury is the one who puts the crown on the sovereign's head. You know what the first act of that queen was to do? Was to take that crown off of her head and to kneel down and to say that she was going to carry out the commands of her king. You know what the commands of her king are? Is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it. And you know what that is? It's to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so, moving forwards, we have a new leader of the opposition. You know, it's her job to be the critic. And we have critics across the way. It's your job to be critics. But let's work together. Under the king, March the 6th, 2023, the Archbishop of Canterbury is going to crown our king. And I hope that we in the province of Saskatchewan can stick to this tired old plan that is going to recycled. It's going to be still with the same old plan to build a strong economy, strong families, and strong communities, because that is growth that benefits everyone. So I'm going to be standing and supporting the motion, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for an opportunity to speak to the throne speech.
Hear, hear. I recognize the member from Indian Head Milestone.
Speaker, I don't think I'm going to be matching that last story anywhere close. But yeah, this will be something completely different. First, I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 4 territory and homeland of the Métis. Mr. Speaker, in this House, and I said it at the pipe ceremony, when you think of treaties in this province, whether it's Treaty 2, Treaty 4, Treaty 5, Treaty 6, 8, and 10, it represents every corner of the province, and there are representatives from every corner of the province. We're all treaty people, and this really becomes a room full of treaty people. There's only a few emblems in this room that talk to the history of this province from First Nations perspective, but we all come from treaty territory, and that is what certainly allows us to be here. I am fortunate to represent the people of Indian Head Milestone and have for a very long time, not since the treaties were signed, I know some would think that, but for a very long time. And in the speech from the throne, it talks just one small paragraph about the redistribution of the constituencies, and that comes about every 10 years. And it comes about over the last 10 years because of real positive population growth, which is great. The only problem that I've got, and I'm going to support, when that bill comes through the House, I'm going to support it 100%, even though when I go through the constituency map, there's no more Indian Head Milestone. that really hurts, Mr. Speaker. I believe that Indian Head and surrounding area will go to Moosomin constituency, and the Milestone area will go to Weyburn, Bengoff, it will be called. And it was funny because the other day it's just kind of been ingrained in me, representing Indian Head Milestone, and the boundary map came out, the final boundary map came out, and I'm thumbing through it, and do you think I could find Indian Head Milestone? There's no Indian Head Milestone. And I haven't got my head around White City Qu'Appelle is the area that would encompass most of the constituency that I have been so fortunate to represent. So certainly some changes when it comes to the boundaries moving forward. As is customary, I like to do a number of thank yous with people from that allow me to do my job, and some will criticize me because if I have 20 minutes to speak, it normally takes me 15 minutes to thank everybody, and then I have about 5 minutes for the throne speech. But I do want to start with the ministry itself. The Ministry of Government Relations, First Nation Métis Relations, Northern Affairs, and the Provincial Capital Commission. And I want to thank my former Deputy Minister, Greg Miller, who has moved on, and now the permanent Deputy Minister, Laurier Donnet, for a job well done, and the expertise that we are so blessed with in so many ministries, but I can only speak towards the one that I am fortunate enough to be minister of. The amazing work that they do and the history that they have when it comes to municipal affairs, for example, or government relations. You know, there's a number of governments in this province with a number of RMs and a number of urbans, resort villages, and the history that they have when there is trouble between, for example, an RM and a community, or maybe RM to RM, or maybe just in a municipality. And I will ask them, has this ever happened before? And the history that they have and the advice that they can give is second to none. So I just want to thank everybody within the ministry. And before I go, and I know I shouldn't single out any one person, but I want to just acknowledge Giselle Marcotte, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for First Nations and Métis Relations, and her team behind her, and the work that they're doing in engaging on the duty to consult. We're in the process now of looking at the duty to consult. It has been in place for 12 years. We have a strong team that is engaging with all these stakeholders, be it First Nations, be it Métis, be it industry, be it government, different municipalities, engaging with those companies and First Nations. The vast majority of this portion of the ministry is made up of First Nation or Métis people that are conducting the engagement process. We're getting to the end of the engagement process, and we'll be looking forward to, kind of an interim report, final report, as to what they heard on their engagement process. So I do want to thank the ministry staff. I also want to talk a little bit about the office staff here in the building, whether it's Max, my Chief of Staff, Melissa, Andrea, or Hillary, and the great work that they do to keep me prepared each and every day if I so get questions, or whether it's meeting requests, that type of thing. They do an absolute great job, really fun office to work with, really great people to work with. In fact, so energetic that the building, the government side of the building, decided to have a Halloween decorating contest within the minister's offices. And, we were early adopters and got a lot of decorations up, and it was amazing how many other offices then, maybe a little slow on the start, but started to pick up a little bit and tried to catch up. Well, the contest, the judges came by on Friday, and they had a good look at every office. And if you happen to be on the third floor and walk down the third floor, there'll be one office that has a tripod out that has a Jason Robbins picture signifying the best decorated office, Mr. Speaker. It would be government relations. So great job. The other person that was also part of that was my constituency assistant, Nicole. I've been very fortunate. I've been elected for 23 years, and I've had 2 constituency assistants over those 23 years. The first one was Vonnie Wittes in the 8 years of in opposition that we spent. She then came to the building and worked in the building for a while, and that's when Nicole Etner-McCullough became my constituency assistant. It's hard to believe when she started in my office working, helping me in the constituency. She has 2 girls. They were 1 and 3. Ashlyn is now in first-year university, and Mattis is in high school following the high school rodeo circuit. Mr. Speaker, hard to believe that much time has passed. But Nicole does a great job in my office and was part of the award-winning, I'll say award-winning office. I don't know if I can mention that enough in the 25 minutes that I have.
You judged it.
No, I didn't judge it. But I know we scared the living daylights out of a couple of the judges that were in the doing the judging.
We'll get you next year.
I want to talk a little bit about the speech from the throne, which is, of course, called Growth That Works for Everyone. In the prelude, it talks a little bit about 2 kind of tragic events that happened, one in our province but was heard around the world, and the other one was a world event that was certainly thought of here in this province. But the first one was the James Smith Cree Nation and what the incident that happened out there. And, you know, I have had the opportunity to be out there a couple times and show my condolences. But on behalf of, you know, publicly on behalf of a province, no one can imagine what those people through the 3 different First Nations there have gone through, will be going through, and what they and the support that they'll need. I had the opportunity to be out there twice. The last time was with 2 other ministers and 3 other MLAs. The member from Saskatoon, Churchill-Wildwood, Athabasca, and Melfort. And you know, I do want to say that it was eye-opening, it was emotional, it was difficult, but it was absolutely well worth all of our time to hear from them firsthand at the trauma that they had been through. I know the one chief had mentioned to me, all 3 chiefs 2 chiefs were there, the other one was on the phone, a number of councillors. It was quite a room full. But the one chief had said to me, and I just want to relay this and to the rest of this chamber and really the province, thanking the member from Melfort. I mean, not a better person could have been there day in and day out. You could hear by the way he spoke here today and, you know, his background, but such an excellent person to be out there on a daily basis, not only kind of in the early times when certainly the media was around, but still continues to service that community as best as he can, and we will as best as we can as a government. And for them to know that, you know, we will be there not only on the weeks and months post-tragedy, but in the years and decades after, and whatever we can do to help the healing process on that First Nation. Just briefly, the passing of the Queen, again, was another shocker, you know, for most of us all, I guess, save for maybe the Minister of CIC, who may have been there during the coronation. But most of us would not have known any other royalty, Mr. Speaker, and so it certainly is a shock, and I don't know if any one person can serve in that role as well as what the Queen did. I had the opportunity to be here, what was it, in about when she was here in 2004 or 5? We were 2005. We were in opposition, I know that. But the Queen was here, and she came to the building, and she spent some time in the building. But of course, there was a honor guard first that she had to inspect, and it was absolutely pouring rain. And it rained and rained and rained, and she came into the landau, she got out, she held, nobody had to hold an umbrella for her. She was as hardy as they came. I guess they get a little bit of rain in London and in England, but we were certainly having a major rainstorm. I think it was in June, and what a trooper she was to go through that, and it didn't hardly even bother her one bit. And so she really did serve, you know, the Commonwealth with amazing grace and dignity. So now on to the speech from the throne and more of the nuts and bolts of this speech. And really it is a positive document. When I was going through it, I thought each and every member could do 20 minutes on one page of it. There is so much information. And really for the first, you know, it's been said for the first time by the media often that much detail in the speech from the throne, and it really was. You know, when you talk about, and what I want to talk about initially is the investment that, that this province is going to see over the next number of years. You know, we've had a pretty good run since 2007 as a government. There's been certainly lots of investment. I think it's roughly around $8 billion was invested in the province from 2007 to about a year ago. But since that time, starting about a year ago, the announcements that have been made in this province and the investment that's coming into this province, some $15 billion at least worth of investment. It's been mentioned before, but the largest mining company in the world, if you can imagine this, the largest mining company in the world is making their very largest investment here in Saskatchewan. $15 billion worth of investment in and around the Jansen for the potash mine, biggest mine, potash mine that the world will have seen, is here in Saskatchewan. You know, and every time I'm in this chamber, whether it's a budget or a speech from the throne, I can't help but hear the contrast between this side that will talk about optimism, it will talk about investment, it'll talk about positivity, and then you go to the side opposite that is negative, that is pretty much everything that they bring up is a crisis. There's a crisis everywhere. I've never seen such a negative 12 members, Mr. Speaker. Such a negative 12 members, Mr. Speaker. Even I'll just quickly, I want to acknowledge the new MLA. Congratulations. If the member from, pardon me? Well, anyway, I wanted to congratulate the new member from Saskatoon-Meewasin. Welcome to this House. I think he will serve his constituency very, very well. And I think you know, he's young and energetic. He's an incumbent now going into the next election. I am sure he's going to serve that constituency very well for a very long time in opposition, Mr. Speaker. And I really welcome him here. I would say that if he wants to idolize somebody from that side, I would idolize the member from Regina Rosemont. The member from Regina Rosemont would be a great fellow to follow. It's interesting, I hear him heckle every so often our member from Regina Walsh Acres, and saying that he can barely hear his voice. We hear his voice very well on this side of the House. He is a lot closer to the people that are making decisions on this side of the House. And it's only been a short number of years, 2 years, Mr. Speaker. He has probably had more impact on the direction of this government than some members say that have been in opposition for 14 years. 15 years, that's right, 2007. Thanks for correcting me. So, if there is someone to idolize on that side, I would certainly say that would be the member for Regina Rosemont, because the nice part about him is he can give it out, but he can also take it. Not always the case with all members, Mr. Speaker, but I'll certainly give him that credit. The other, one other thing, though, that I do want to say to the member from Meewasin is that I've been around for quite a while, and I've seen some spins. In fact, I have a son that's made a living spinning, whether it's going around and around or upside down. I think he's the first one to do a triple cork 1600, whatever that is. But never in my life have I seen a minister spin a 180 as quickly as that member, a member spin a 180 as that member did from Regina or from Saskatoon-Meewasin. To be so solid on one side of an issue, and it's not kind of a gray issue, you know, where I know the former leader, Miley, talked about kind of for pipelines, kind of not. Nothing could be more solid than rip the bandage off, privatize liquor stores, and 2 days into his job, on the completely other side, I have never seen a 180 spun as quickly as a member from Saskatoon-Meewasin. Mr. Speaker, the other piece, as I go through this, is the affordability plan and how significant that is. There is $1 billion that is going to debt. $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. That is a huge payment that will pay dividends for all. All will benefit from paying down debt, Mr. Speaker. $1 billion to debt. Not everybody maybe will benefit from the relaxation of PST on gym fees, Mr. Speaker, but that was another one. The whole issue around small business and the sales tax, small business tax rate, Mr. Speaker. But the one that's really quite interesting to hear the members opposite dance around this one is the $500 affordability check. When they called for it, I think it was $110 that they called for, and I don't know if they don't agree with the extra $390 that everybody's going to be getting. It wasn't quite soon enough, Mr. Speaker. That was one of them. But how could they argue with the affordability check when they called for that very thing? So I haven't heard yet, and I haven't heard all the opposition speeches, but I would be hoping that some of them will say what a great idea that is. Yeah. So they're saying that, but they haven't said it in their speech. And how you can really say that you agree with the affordability check is simply vote. When we vote for the speech from the throne, vote for the speech from the throne, which is what I will be doing, and not for the amendment, Mr. Speaker. I have got an awful lot to say, Mr. Speaker, and one of the things that I would am really interested as I go through this speech from the throne is when you get to the area of agriculture, and normally when you talk about agriculture, you talk about, the canola crops, the canola crushing plants in various locations. But I just looked at the section around agriculture, and it's a great section around agriculture, and it's had a very good representation as great ministries of agriculture in this province for 15 years. I'll say all 15 years. But so much of the investment is going to have such an impact on the city of Regina. And again, I've heard a few of the MLAs from Regina speak, and I haven't really heard them talk about the positive investment in and around the city of Regina. Cargill has broke ground on a $350 million canola crushing plant at where? The Global Transportation Hub. I heard the member from Rosemont talk, he just in passing was kind of criticizing and downplaying the GTH and the investment that's going in there, even though these are jobs that will be happening in and around Regina, his constituency. He also talked a little bit about the bypass and how terrible the bypass was, except the nice part for us is we haven't heard him have to read a petition on get traffic off of Dewdney. How we got traffic off of Dewdney was putting it into the bypass. So it's really an interesting juxtaposition. Federated Co-op Limited and AGT Foods are planning to construct a $2 billion integrated agricultural complex in the Regina area. Viterra is moving forward with a new canola crushing plant in Regina that will create thousands of construction jobs and hundreds of permanent jobs. I don't know if we've ever had a section that talks about agriculture with such a benefit to the capital city, and I haven't heard it come out on that side. So real positive developments with the speech from the throne. Lots of investment into infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. In the next 4 years, about $12 billion of investment into infrastructure. What that does is builds new arenas in Assiniboine. We'll be putting an arena in Meadow Lake that burnt down. That's infrastructure for all of the province that will benefit all of the province, Mr. Speaker. That growth that works for everyone. But just the last few things I want to say, because my time is waning here, running out, is that I went through the speech from the throne a couple times and read it, and it didn't really stand out to me as it did when the Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Russ Morasti, read the speech from the throne, and how many times First Nations and Métis were mentioned in the speech from the throne, and how it was really talked about reconciliation, whether it was a SaskPower agreement to purchase electricity for 2 solar projects involving First Nations, the George Gordon First Nation and the Star Blanket First Nation, in and around the Weyburn area. Cowess's First Nation owns the majority. Mr. Speaker, that was part of it, Mr. Speaker, part of the speech from the throne. The MOU signed by the Atakakuk Cree Nation on a collaborative approach to the Saskatoon Urgent Care Centre, another form of reconciliation, economic reconciliation in this province. Committed up to $255,000 to the First Nations University of Canada to deliver the Dene teacher education program. Commitment to gather feedback from the First Nation and Métis consultation policy framework. I've already touched on that. Mr. Speaker, so many other examples. This is just but a fraction of the advancement and progression of First Nations, be it Métis or First Nation in this province. There are so many First Nation reserves that have got so into economic development, and how good that is for the people within that First Nation, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I see my time is pretty much run out, but what I will say is that, you know, when you listen to the members opposite, they may have a leader, but I can tell you that the speeches haven't changed for 15 years of me standing in this place. The leader may be different, but the message is still the same. Same speech is you can change the person, but you haven't changed the words or the philosophy. I think that, Mr. Speaker, moving forward, this speech from the throne serves this province so very well. I'm going to be supporting it. I'll be rejecting the motion, Mr. Speaker, and I would say for the opposition, if they so choose to remain at 12, vote against the speech from the throne. I think that will ensure your spot at 12 members well into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Batoche.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the privilege of addressing this year's throne speech. First, I would like to thank my CA, Marianne. She has been my CA for 19 years and is one amazing lady. Her support and ability have kept me afloat through 5 elections. To her, I say a heartfelt thank you and God bless. I would like to thank the people of my constituency, Batoche, who are mainly ag and small business. The largest town in Batoche is maybe 700 residents. I would also like to thank my family and friends for their support. Most especially, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my closest advisor, my best friend, and my wife, Valerie. She has made many sacrifices on my behalf, and for that, I love her and thank her from the bottom of my heart. Today, Mr. Speaker, today is our 47th wedding anniversary. I would also like to thank our Premier, the member from Roster and Shellbrook, for his leadership through these COVID years. We didn't have an operator's manual, and at times, we were running in the dark. We have come through far, far better than most provinces. So once again, Mr. Premier, thank you. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the MLAs of the Saskatchewan Party and also their staff, both here in the House and the many CAs across our beautiful province. Mr. Speaker, when I first arrived here in this House, I was part of the government opposition. The NDP government of that time was content to be what their leader, Lorne Calvert, called us, the wee province. Mr. Speaker, he then went on to say we would always be in and out of equalization. I would also like to comment when we were working on criticizing the government for the declining population, Eldon Laudermilk, then minister, said, the less population, the more there is for the rest of us. Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with those statements, and neither did the people of Saskatchewan. That marked the beginning of the end of a 16-year downward slide for the NDP. Mr. Speaker, due to the hard work by the Saskatchewan Party, we can now see the light at the end of the tunnel, growing brighter and brighter. It has been a long haul. Years of fear for family and friend, years of uncertainty, years of living with the COVID cloud over our head. Mr. Speaker, our government did not hesitate. We moved forward. We kept building our economy for the future. Our government knows that all things are based on the economy. The economy is first. Without the economy, everything stops. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken on this before, but it very much bears to be repeated again and again. It does not matter what disaster happens, natural, man-made. The economy must carry us through. It does not matter if it's wars, tsunamis, pandemic, natural disasters of any kind and all kinds. If the economy falters, a domino effect happens, and the disaster multiplies exponentially. The only solution is aid, and it must come from other locations. The aid must continue until the economy of that country, state, or province can support its own people. Once again, the desired outcome is based on the economy. Our province, our country, and in fact the world is just now recovering from a global pandemic. No one has been left untouched, either directly or indirectly, in some shape or form. And now begins the recovery. Most countries are preparing for a long and slow recovery. So what is happening in our province? Throughout this pandemic, our province has kept the economy working. We've seen companies choose our province as their home base. We've seen investments that now reach beyond $14 billion. These are investments that could have gone to other provinces or states. Why did they choose Saskatchewan? What were the factors that brought them to Saskatchewan? Number one would be the availability and the quantity of natural resources. Another reason, of course, would be the province's support and tax structure. Also, the availability of skilled labor. We have made an unprecedented move by opening trade and investment offices in China, India, Japan, Mexico, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, UK, and South Vietnam. Mr. Speaker, that is so significant. We no longer will be trading just through Canada. We will be direct trading Saskatchewan to India or wherever. Mr. Speaker, the reality of what this will do for our province is staggering. We will have world connections for trade and commerce. The we province will be trading directly with the world. With all our natural resources, we'll be a province to be reckoned with. We will be punching way above our weight. We're basing our predictions on over the billions worth of investments that are being infused into our Saskatchewan economy. We're basing our future not just on that investment, but our performance during the pandemic. Saskatchewan exports, and we will go for 2021, were $37.1 billion. That is a new high for this province. It breaks the previous record of 2014 by almost 25%. The record set then was $35.3 billion, and we have broken that during a pandemic. Here are some statistics. All-time high in ag exports, $17.5 billion. All-time high in forestry sales, $1.8 billion. Merchandising exports, $37.2 billion. To top that off, a 7-year low on unemployment. Plus, to prove it, January of our present year 22, wholesale trade was over $3.3 billion, and that was just in the first month. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned ag reaching an all-time high. In spite of a pandemic, our farmers and ranchers soldiered on and not just kept up production, they increased it. We owe a great debt to our agricultural producers. I have said before, any country that cannot feed its people is headed for disaster. Agriculture is the backbone of this province. It is what built this province and now sustains our province. Saskatchewan has, depending on the crop year, from 47 to 51% of all of Canada's cropland. Let me repeat that. Saskatchewan has from 47 to 51% of all of Canada's cropland. It is maintained, according to our last census, I get this one, 34,526 farmers and ranchers. That's 34,526 farmers and ranchers. When we look at the war that is happening in the Ukraine, we know that there will be shortages of grain and other commodities around the entire world. We are rich in all those commodities. Now we have the opportunity to fill the gap of world shortages. We have fuel, food, and fertilizer that the world needs. Our farmers and ranchers are meeting the demand for those shortfalls. The same applies to our oil and potash. We've made the contacts with the trade office in order to sell these commodities to the world. Our shortfall lies in getting our products to the market. We need pipelines, railway cars to move our products to market. This is the biggest impediment that our province faces, getting our products to market. All the steps are there except for the final hurdle, transportation. We must unite and leave no stone unturned. We need to push every federal button. We cannot stop until the transportation dilemma is solved. The problem does not lie with the provincial government. The problem lies solely in the hands of the federal government. The federal government are the ones that must clear the path. The federal government are the ones that must solve the transportation dilemma, not just for the West, but for all of Canada. We would all benefit. The federal government are the ones that need to make it happen. When I look at the past and see how far agriculture has come, it is truly mind-boggling. My father, as a young man, started farming walking behind a horse and plow. That was the standard for farming for my father, and that's not that long ago, a horse and plow. He finished farming in a four-wheel drive tractor with air-conditioned cab, power steering, hydraulic floating seat, and pulling 70 feet of implement. Mr. Speaker, I fondly remember showing my father how to drive one of these new monster four-wheel drive tractors. By the evening, he was smiling as bigger as ever and thought, this is Cadillac farming. He thought it just couldn't get any better. Mr. Speaker, farming has not reached its peak. The new methods and innovations keep coming. Research goes on at the University of Saskatchewan, and they have changed the face of agriculture and will continue to do so. We see on the horizon riderless tractors and other new innovations we never imagined. We need to support our producers and remember that we are the breadbasket of the world. My father always said, they can print more money, but they can't make more dirt. Agriculture is the foundation of our economy, and may God bless our farmers and ranchers. I would now like to refer to Mr. Adam Smith, an 18th century Scottish philosopher. He is considered the father of modern economics. He is also considered to be the founder of GDP, to calculate a country's wealth. For those who don't know, GDP is gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, his theories were implemented and still hold true today. He is credited with saying the following words: high wages do not create prosperity. Prosperity creates high wages. Let me repeat that. High wages do not create prosperity. Prosperity creates high wages. It is a truism that has stood the test of time and has been proven over and over throughout our history. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to address a very important topic: health care. Medicare, as it is now called, was first introduced to this province by the RM of Boulier and the RM of Swift Current. Then it was brought to the province by the NDP and finally adopted by all of Canada. When I entered government, Saskatchewan health care had deteriorated to the point of being the worst health care in all of Canada. Doctors were leaving, nurses were leaving, and the NDP government closed 52 hospitals. The foundation was crumbling due to their mismanagement. Students graduating from medical school and from nursing school packed their bags and moved to another province or another country. Now the NDP say we need more doctors, nurses, even though we brought in thousands. We have now increased student intake for doctors and nurses. We've also brought over 4,000 nurses and over 1,000 doctors. The remarkable point I would like to make on this is the NDP, if they had not closed 52 hospitals and driven away doctors and nurses, we wouldn't have such a large hole to fill. They would have been the foundation of health care, and our province would have grown. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to address one very sensitive situation: Western separation. I understand where they're coming from. What they profess, though, is wrong. We cannot take that path. Before I go on, Mr. Speaker, I would like to tell you a true story. The story is taken from a new book out, The Tattooist of Auschwitz. The story takes place, of course, in Auschwitz, Poland, the Nazi death camp. When a trainload of Jewish and political prisoners arrived, they were stripped of their clothing and marched out in the middle of the yard to be tattooed. This clothing was piled up in a room, and a select group of girls would go into that room and they would check through the seams and linings of everything to check for hidden diamonds, gold, cash. And this was the greatest job in the whole camp. The girls who could get that job were under a roof, and it was the best of the best. And so when a trainload would arrive, they would ask each other, "Where are you working today?" And they decided, let's name this room. Let's give it a name. And they decided, let's name it after the most beautiful place in the world. Let's name it after the place we all want to go to. And they named it the Canada Room. The Canada Room. The world saw Canada as the greatest place in the world even then, in 1943. Let's not destroy the greatest country in the world. Let's fix it. I acknowledge we have problems. Let's fix it together. Let's have Saskatchewan and the West take our rightful place in confederation. Let's fix Canada, not destroy it. Mr. Speaker, for all the above reasons and for many more, I will not be supporting the amendment, and I will fully support the speech from the throne. God bless Saskatchewan, and God bless Canada. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon-Nutana.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to be on my feet here today and enter into debate in the response to the throne speech. And I want to start by, as members on both sides have been doing regularly here, is saying how proud and thankful I am for all those that support me in the work that I do here in the legislature. I want to thank my family and my friends that support me back home and ensure that while I'm here in Regina, that the rest of my family is being taken care of, and that my home is looked after, and I want to really say thank you to them. I really appreciate the support, the love, the care that they extend to me, so that I can be here in Regina for session. I want to thank my staff, in particular Carrie Schaefer, whom I've mentioned before, and is really sort of the rock in my constituency office, who took on the role as constituency assistant with, not really a broad base of experience, but definitely the qualities and the attitude to allow her to grow into the role and perform so superbly. And so, Carrie, if you're listening, I want to say thank you so much for all that you do. She's been supported also by other part-time staff from time to time, Nadia Risto, Christine, Graham, and others who provide some backup support. And I'm really grateful for the work that they do, meeting the needs of constituents in the casework that comes across our desk, ensuring that it's handled professionally and in a timely fashion. Not just the work of my constituents, but also those who come forward with concerns in my critic areas as well. It's a big job, it's an important job, and I'm so appreciative of the work that Carrie and the rest of the staff do to ensure that it's made with the highest level of professionalism and duty of care. Of course, I also want to acknowledge and thank the people of my constituency, Saskatoon-Nutana, for the great honor to be able to serve them here in the Assembly, and for the work that they do that is contributing to the vibrancy of our community, to the success of our community. I think that the people of Saskatoon-Nutana are unmatched in their dedication, their commitment, their level of participation and engagement as citizens here in Saskatchewan to ensure that we are the best place to live in all of Canada, that we have programs and supports that really ensure that we're taking care of one another and meeting the needs of citizens, but also having fun along the way. And I think of the work that is done to support so many community events like the Fringe Festival, which is held in my constituency annually. And of course, that's a wider initiative than just Saskatoon-Nutana, but we're so proud to host the Fringe year in and year out, especially now, after a few tough years coming out of the pandemic with lower attendance and the rationalization that has required, but they still manage to pull off a quality event every year that is well received by the community and people who look to the arts as part of what is contributing to the vibrancy in our community and makes it such a fun and attractive place to live. I mean, when we think about all the things that we have to be grateful for living here in Saskatchewan and what makes it such a great place, certainly having that pride of place and a range of cultural and artistic opportunities and events that people can be an attractor to Saskatchewan and to Saskatoon. And it's the good people of Saskatoon, Nutana, that contribute in big ways and small ways to that vibrancy. I also, just as another example, want to mention the Broadway Street Fair, held every September by the merchants in the Business Improvement District of Saskatoon, Nutana. Again, an incredible day that brings people from across the city to experience the cultural vibrancy of the Broadway district, the many businesses, local businesses, locally owned and operated businesses that can offer local merchandise, local content, locally owned, and give it that special quality and character that Nutana has become known for, our reputation as a thriving hub of local enterprise, and not the least of which would be also the Steep Hill Co-op that I had the honor of delivering a member statement on earlier today. So whether it's cooperatives or the Broadway Collective, where I have my office that's able to offer a hub for entrepreneurs, for professionals, for small businesses to be able to have a place to connect, to make connections and increase their networks, be able to access their clients and the wider community. It's these kinds of innovative and entrepreneurial endeavors in my home constituency of Saskatoon, Nutana, that I am so proud to represent their interests, their aspirations, their visions for how to have a great community here in Saskatchewan. And I thank them for everything that they do. I thank them for the opportunity to represent them here in this assembly. And I can't say just how proud that makes me. To be able to represent here in the assembly their concerns, their hopes and dreams, and their needs as we march onwards towards what has become, quite frankly, an uncertain future marked by recent geopolitical events beyond our borders that have spelt rising uncertainty and inflation. So on the one hand, we have great pride, we have great hope, we have great optimism in the great land of Saskatoon-Nutana. while as a buffer towards those larger geopolitical factors that the member for Regina Rosemont spoke of earlier this week, and provides that backdrop and context for where we find ourselves today as a province. But when I think about the pride that I feel for my community and my role representing the constituency, and I think about the pride that they feel and the potential that we possess as a province, I want to focus my comments here, because without pride in who you are as a people and as a nation, you'll lose hope. You lose conviction. You doubt your collective abilities and your spark fades out, and that is something that we absolutely must guard against. People need hope. They need to be proud. They need to be proud of where they are from. And Saskatchewan people more broadly, we are known for our pride. We're proud of our sports teams. We're proud of the hospitality that we're known for. We're proud of being a welcoming place for people across the globe in their time in need. And that's the Saskatchewan I want to be proud of. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you a little story. In my former life, I did a lot of travel, business travel outside of Saskatchewan. It afforded me the opportunity to visit other parts of Canada, other parts of the world, Asia, South America, Europe, and one of the things I used to be proud to talk about more than anything else as an unofficial ambassador of Saskatchewan was how proud I was to be from Saskatchewan, the birthplace of Medicare, and so many other great firsts. Not only did we possess true statesmen and premiers like Alan Blakeney and Roy Romano, who ensured that there was a charter for all Canadians that we could be proud of and that truly reflected the interests of Saskatchewan people. We punched above our weight in all aspects of social innovation and sound fiscal policy, whether that be the introduction of the first human rights bill in North America and the revamping of our education system, introducing labor laws that protected workers. Now that's something that works for everyone. Labor legislation that protects against hazardous materials was developed first here in Saskatchewan. We struck a new deal for resource development that benefited residents of Saskatchewan's north. And the members opposite want to talk as though they're the ones responsible for the way that we are ground breakers on Indigenous inclusion. And that is a proud piece of our Saskatchewan history as New Democrats, and I don't think that should be forgotten. We electrified rural Saskatchewan. We created crown corporations as well that truly worked for everyone. We had technological innovations in fiber optics led by SaskTel. And of course, not last but not least, world-leading technological advancements in high energy efficiency homes by the Saskatchewan Research Council, and many other innovations by that cutting-edge organization. The list goes on. It goes on and it goes on. So many reasons for me to be proud of being from Saskatchewan. And I don't know why I have to keep saying this, but I'm proud to promote our rich resource endowment. My career was based on that endowment, that legacy here in Saskatchewan. Whether it be potash and uranium, to the rare earth metals we need to catalyze the clean energy transition. These are things to be proud of. And I was proud to speak to people from across the world, people in Ottawa, Vancouver, wherever I went, about how our resources were ensuring that we provided for social progress for Saskatchewan people. And all of this, while ensuring environmental protections. We weren't making a bargain here of one over the other. We were ensuring we had robust legislation and a credible regulatory framework that offered stability and certainty for investment, people, by companies sincerely focused on both environmental and social governance and earning the social license they depend upon to be able to sell their commodities in a competitive marketplace. And now, Mr. Speaker, I know I've hit a nerve over on that other side. Judging by the heckling I'm starting to hear but quite can't discern from across the way. But let me be clear. Let me be clear. We don't have economic progress without sound regulatory and environmental legislation. The companies that are coming here, and I can say this on great authority as someone who has worked in the industry, companies are not going to come and invest in Saskatchewan if they aren't confident that we have sound and stable regulatory policy. It's just that simple. Now, as I say, at the time, these were the things that I was very proud to represent and speak on, because these were the things that made Saskatchewan great. These were the things that made me proud to be from Saskatchewan. But now, Mr. Speaker, I want to borrow a term from our illustrious Minister of Public Safety and Corrections, who says, now we're infamous internationally, but not for our proud accomplishments, I'm sorry to say, but for all the wrong reasons instead. We're infamous for attempting to kick a young Indigenous man off the front lawns of the legislative grounds for the simple desire to draw attention to high rates of youth suicides in Indigenous communities. The member for for Cumberland spoke earlier today in question period on that very issue from a report from the FSIN about the high rates of suicide in Indigenous communities. Not something for us to be proud of, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're infamous, and I'm going back a little ways in your political memories, but you will recall, we're infamous for having our Chief Medical Officer break down crying last fall because of Saskatchewan having the worst COVID death rate in the entire country. Can you imagine how that felt? To feel so crestfallen, so impotent, so powerless, to invoke health policy measures that protected the people of this great province, literally brought to tears. That was one short year ago. And that was not a proud moment. That was a moment when we made national headlines. Let's remember. We were infamous once again. We're infamous for penning white papers so poorly conceived and constructed that news columnists call it pidgin English. The math so dubious that economists give it a failing grade. The twisted narrative so convoluted one wonders how it might draw a straight line to anything, much less honestly reflect the vital interests of Saskatchewan people. And you heard last night from the member from Saskatoon Eastview who drew attention to some of the commentary that has been shared in the news media on that white paper, even by conservative politicos. And I'm sure you'll recall the reference to Howard Anglin, who was a former Deputy Chief of Staff to Stephen Harper. And what did he have to say about that white paper? He called it shoddy. He said that drawing the line is a new low in political communications in Canada. It is doubtful that any government in the history of Confederation, federal, provincial, or municipal, has published something so badly written. He goes on to say that the text is not so much spoiled by errors, but composed of them. This is a white paper that is, ostensibly intended to be a thought piece and put out the issues and the desires of government, and yet we had a document that was incoherent. It made no sense. And now today, of course, we see a piece of legislation tabled to sort of further on that agenda. And yet, and I won't speak a lot about it here today because I know we'll debate it next week in session, but I mean, it's this notion of, being a nation within a nation, and what that affords us as a people here in Saskatchewan. And when I think about that and the flimsy arguments that it's based upon and the things that it's ignoring, it's just making us another laughingstock. There's nothing here to be proud of in terms of statesmanhood and ensuring that this government is looking after the best interests of Saskatchewan, when instead it is really just playing political games, I'm afraid. Using it as a form of distraction from the real issues that are facing the people of Saskatchewan. And I'm sorry to say that it leads very little for us to be proud of. Now, I want to go back to what I was saying earlier, and I've kind of got to find my spot here in my notes for a second here. But I'm going to take my time. So, okay, I think I've found my spot here. So I'm going to move off the issue of the white paper for now. I might come back to it later if there's time, but I want to get to the matter in which this throne speech was introduced here in the Assembly. Unfortunately, I was not able to be here that day. I was home convalescing. You may hear it in my voice still, but I watched the throne speech from home, and it wasn't until afterwards that I learned about the attendance of Colin Thatcher here in the Assembly. And I know I certainly would have been shocked, dismayed, and in disbelief to have seen him present here in the Assembly. And here we are again, infamous. We have an infamous wife killer invited to the Assembly, a former Conservative cabinet minister, and at a throne speech that was supposed to be a focused, a tough on crime agenda, and yet they're sitting next to a police chief. We have a convicted killer, a convicted wife killer, an individual who has never acknowledged his crimes. And worse than that, we had a member from Lumsden, a parliamentary secretary, a former cabinet minister, we had the Premier himself, and we had the Minister of Public Safety, all defending his presence here in the Assembly. An absolute new low for this government. And while I am relieved that after 5 days of soul searching and international condemnation for such a deplorable act, that we finally had the Premier be pressured into making an unequivocal apology, something I called for him to do over Twitter, and I like to think I maybe had a little something to do with that. But I know that, the calls were coming from far and wide, from, within his own family, etc. But you know what, Mr. Deputy Speaker? It shouldn't take 5 days. It shouldn't take international condemnation. This is a question of moral integrity. This is a question of understanding right from wrong. It's a question of understanding what that individual represented to the women of this province, to all of the families who have been affected by intimate partner violence and femicide here in Saskatchewan, a province, a nation within a nation with the highest rates of domestic violence in the country. Now, is that what makes us distinct as a society? The fact that we have the highest rates of crime and violence, illiteracy, poverty, food bank usage? I mean, none of these indicators are things to be proud of. And to allow a convicted killer still serving lifetime sentence. Yeah, sure, he's out on parole, but he's been convicted for life. And he was allowed to come and sit in this Assembly, to have the honor and the privilege of being present in this Assembly on the day of a throne speech by the King's representative. I mean, what could be more sacred, more hallowed than this Assembly on that day? And that was a slap in the face. And the fact that that was wasn't immediately apparent to the government side, and they went out into the gallery or the front rotunda and defended that and doubled down on the defense of those actions is is astounding. It's absolutely astounding. It's deflected from the agenda of the government, and it was not a proud day, yet again. Members opposite, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know, I've been listening to their comments over the last couple of days, and they tried about, oh, you guys are so negative. Why don't you ever have anything, you know, positive to say? And yeah, you know, I started my speech by talking about how proud I am of my constituency. I'm proud of my work in the resource sector. I'm proud of the industries and businesses that are working hard to ensure a vibrant economy. But there's a whole lot of denial going on that side of the House. And when we can't acknowledge our failings, when we can't acknowledge our mistakes, when we can't acknowledge that this is not growth that works for everyone, we have fundamental problems. And it's our job as an opposition to point those out, to hold you to account, to remind you of the indicators that matter. The members opposite want to pull, you know, statistics and figures out of thin air to substantiate, you know, just how great things are in Saskatchewan. And believe me, I want nothing more. I want nothing more than for Saskatchewan to have a strong, vibrant economy and growth that works for everyone. I want to be from a province whose interests are being represented on the national stage. But, and this is the thing, but, you know, when you ignore the plight of your citizens, when you ignore the fact that young Indigenous people in Saskatchewan have lost hope and are turning to suicide as their only avenue, well, maybe we have a problem. And I mean, I couldn't be more understated in saying that. You know, these are issues that need to be confronted, not swept under the rug and explained away by rising boats. And it takes actual effort. It takes funding, operational funding for second stage transitional housing. It takes programs that are going to give our youth hope, that is going to address the mental health crisis and the drug crisis we are facing here in Saskatchewan. That is how we will get to the roots of crime. And when you have a convicted murderer sitting in the Assembly, I ask myself, you know, like, who are you trying to protect? Who are you actually trying to protect when you talk about being tough on crime, and yet, you know, domestic violence, you know, crime, family on family is being fueled by a drug crisis here that is breaking down the very fabrics of our communities and our families, and this government has been impotent to do anything about it. And I don't think it helps to deny that these issues are in front of us, that these issues are real, that they need to be addressed, and we need funding commitments to ensure that the work can be done, to make life better, to make this a province again that we can be proud to be from, so that we can have headlines in international papers that once again talk about the great things that are happening in Saskatchewan. You know, a place, and you know, here's a bold vision. You know, a province that truly takes care of its people and brings up the most disadvantaged through legislation and programming that meets those needs in tangible ways, so that we do truly all benefit as a province, and that, you know, it is growth that works for everyone. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will not be supporting the motion to accept this throne speech. I will be supporting the amendment that has been introduced by the member for Regina Rosemont. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.
I recognize the member from Moose Jaw, Wakima.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And now something on a totally different note. I'm going to talk about the speech from the throne that was spoke to by the Honourable Russ Morasti, our Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan. And it's about growth that works for everyone. First thing I do and have to do is, like many of my colleagues on both sides of the House have done, is thank the people that helped get me here. Usually I start with my family, but this time I'm going to start with my constituency assistants, because I may have forgot them in the past with my lengthy list. So first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to Simone. She's been with me now for a couple of years. It's not just Simone that is part of it. It is Theo, her son, and Nigel, her husband. It's almost, we're a small family in my office, and we all work very well together. She's the face that's most people see 90% of the time when they come into my office, and it's always got a smile on her face. And when people stop me in the street or give me a call and they say, Simone does a fantastic job, she really cares. So thank you, Simone. However, I picked up an old new employee. I had a lady that worked for me a while ago, but her husband got posted to under the mountain down there in Colorado. So he was working with the Space Cadets, I think the States called them after Trump started them. So Sherry's been working for me before. She worked for me when I was president of the Métis. She worked with me on my campaign. She's worked in my office before. And she does a great job. She has a heart for this province like very few I've seen. Her family has deep roots on the Métis side, and I think we figured out we're probably 4th or 5th cousins if you go back far enough on the Caplet and Blondo side. Somewhere along the line we're related, but it's a long ways away. Next, I want to thank my family, and I'll do the best I can without cracking up. Usually I get a little weepy and might get a lump in my throat, but I think I'll get through it this time. I've got Ryan and Macy out in Manitoba, and I think Charlie and Walker are watching. So hi guys, good to see ya. Love you guys, miss you, wish you were back here. But Ryan and Macy, they are part of my anchor. When I gotta get away, I either go to mom and dad's place, who I can't thank enough, or out to the farm. When I go out to the farm in southwestern Manitoba, it's only 10 miles across the border. If everybody remembers a few years back, there was that municipality in Manitoba that wanted to separate. That's where my boy is. He moved into the right part of Manitoba. They actually want to join Saskatchewan. Not that we're looking to annex any of Manitoba, but, you know, wouldn't be a bad idea. No, That was a joke. That was a joke. We're not annexing anybody, and I apologize. Then there's Dylan and his girlfriend Monica, and Kaylee and Derek. They're my grandkids and Moose Jaw's parents. And like they say, my grandkids are lucky. They got 2 dads, 2 moms. And that's Jordison, Jackson, and Attica. I get to spend a lot of time with them. Dylan gets them just about every other weekend, and I always get to spend time with them when he's got the kids, and sometimes even when they come down the street, because they just moved to the end of the block on the next block down. So Jordy comes down and visits me quite often. Mom and Dad, I mentioned them. I wouldn't probably be doing this still without them, but they're good salt of the earth folks that grew up working in the oil field and down in that S-Van area, and it was nothing to work 10, 12, 14, however long days to get the rig moved and take it from one spot to put it in the other. And that work ethic has carried forward into this job where I can sit up till 10:30 and we're back here first thing in the morning. Luckily, I don't have to do it for 182 days straight like I did when I was working in the oil field, but I was a much, much younger man way back then, much. Then I've got some friends that have become family over the last couple of years that have got me through some special times, and that's Brett and Brenda. You know exactly who you are. We've got Clint and Jen, good friends, very good friends, and Jen even works here now. We've got Mel and Velvet. There's been some times in the last couple of years where things haven't been all that great during COVID, and these people help me keep everything together. And if anybody noticed, I have a constant companion. He's not here in the house with me, but his name's Oliver, and that's my service dog. I get to work with him every day, and I want to thank the folks at Audiamus who worked with me every week to get our bond closer together. Ollie's a good dog. He loves everybody, but he likes me best. Now for some other things. I can't say this with a smile on my face, but the thing that happened out at James Smith Cree Nation, that rocked everybody in the province. Hurt everybody to the core. Scared people that could happen in our province. I had friends phoning me, where is he, what's going on, have they caught him? And this went on for a couple of days. So I can't imagine what my friend from Melfort felt when he was there. I don't know if I could have done it. My heart isn't that strong anymore. But my prayers and condolences, and I can't say anything else than we as government are going to be there to help you heal, doing what we can do. Then there's our Queen. We lost our Queen, and I got the oath of allegiance that I swore when I first got elected, and I remember I was between 2 giants. One was a giant in the party, which was Mr. Ken Kravets, who was the deputy leader at that time, one of the founding members of the Sask party, and then the other one was a former rider. And I know we're not supposed to name him, but it goes in alphabetical order, and he's the Minister for Social Services now. So there's Ken on this side, little old Greg, and then there's this great big minister from Social Services on the other side, 2 giants. And I swore the oath of allegiance with, I, Greg Lawrence, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, so help me God. I swore that oath. That's not the only oath I swore to the Queen. When I swore my oath as a military member, I swore it to the Queen of Canada. We lost somebody very special that loved our country very much. And I will swear the oath of allegiance to His Majesty after he gets crowned. You explained how it was after he gets crowned. And if and when the people of Moose Jaw Waccamaw elect me after the next election, because I'm not done yet, as the SAS Party's not done being in government yet, and I plan on continuing working hard for the people of Moose Jaw Waccamaw that I'm honored to serve, so I want to thank them for putting me here for a third time. My last round of thank yous won't take near as long, and I'm not tracking my time, so somebody's going to have to let me know. We've got some new people in our caucus office, and they're the ones that keep the majority of the MLAs that sit back here on track. We've got Shelby, who's our new comms officer. We've got Leanne and Jana, who are our new admins. We've got Ange Curry, who is new to us, but not new to this building, and she's one of the reasons I get to do this. I talked to her first about running for the party. Geez, that'd be all the way back in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, quite a while ago. And then we've got Chris Rasmussen, who I used to sometimes dread talking to because he was a reporter, and he was absolutely fantastic when he did that job. Now he's on our side and doing a much better job there. And then we've got Kim as well, who works in there, and Marta. So, on to growth that works for everyone. And you have to start off with the strong economy. And that strong economy is what provides the fuel for the engine that drives the economy of this province. In this province, if we didn't have a block in Ottawa, or several blocks in Ottawa, we would be driving the economy of the nation. We've got the lowest unemployment, we've got great growth coming into this province, and I want to talk to you about that growth. And it is unfortunate that we can't grow faster, and one of the reasons we can't grow faster is we don't have enough people to work. My friend Brett owns an electric company in Moose Jaw, and he has been constantly advertising for electricians for the last 6 months, and he can't fill it. He can't fill it. He's got more work than he can, well, not more work than he can handle, but he's back on the tools. So, you know, if there's any electricians out there, give me a call. I'll point you in Brett's direction. I've got plumbers that are looking for people to work with, carpenters, across the board. And these are good paying jobs, very good paying jobs. People forgot that the trades are what build our country. And luckily we have SAS Poly and Moose Jaw and across the province reaching out, providing those young people the training it takes to get them to work in our province. And we heard the numbers earlier today, like 92, 94%. That's absolutely amazing, and it's people mostly staying in our province nowadays, not leaving like years in the past. So part of that strong economy, we have the world's largest mining company building a mine and accelerating it. Yes, they were building it before the atrocity that's happening in the Ukraine right now by a socialist government. I'm not sure. He's not communist, socialist, whatever it is. Socialism's not good when they invade another country. Not good at all. So we've also opened up our borders to as many of our friends from the Ukraine that we can. And we've had 3 plane loads full land here. There's more being planned, and they're moving right into the communities with the help of our member from Kenora Pelly. And I've heard him speak a little bit of Ukrainian, and I don't understand it all, but I know it's good because he says it with a smile. And I want to welcome all those people from Ukraine here, as well as all our newcomers. In Moose Jaw, we have a very thriving new Chinese immigration population there. Businesses are popping up all over town, everything from car parts to jewelry stores to selling small engines, small engine repair. I've taken it to the one on South Hill a few times because I might forget to change the oil in my lawnmower, so I take it there and get them to do it in the fall. That thriving population wouldn't come without growth. Without growth, we wouldn't be able to pay for the things that we need to pay to help out the people that are less fortunate. So I'm going to skip ahead here a bit so I don't forget about this, because this is important to me. There's 2. There's the government 4-point plan, action plan, to add more than 1,000 healthcare professionals of all kinds across our province. Now that's a good news, not only for northern Saskatchewan or our small rural towns, but in places like Moose Jaw. I talk to nurses as well, and I talk to doctors as well, and I hear how hard they work. We know how hard they work. We're looking to find those people. However, if the negativity is all that's out there on the airwaves, it's going to be really hard to recruit people to actually come and work in these industries if all they hear is a constant complaining. The people I talk to are like, yes, we love our job. Yes, we're tired. Yes, we're going to keep working. Yes, it'll be nice when your government actually does what they say they're going to do, because that's what we do here in the government of Saskatchewan with the Sask Party leading it. We do what we say we're going to do. So that's what helps make growth for everyone. Oh, training. Recruiting is one, training is the next one. So accelerated training and licensing for our international nurses. 150 new nurse training seats in the province. Oh, wow. And, okay, good. I'll finish off with this. Incentivize, and this was on, there's this Facebook group in Moose Jaw that I occasionally look at, and it's called MJ Talks. And somebody actually put on there, we need to incentivize nurses and doctors to come to small towns like Moose Jaw. Well, up to $50,000 in incentives for hard-to-recruit positions, mainly in rural areas. Now, a lot of people don't consider Moose Jaw a rural area, but as I point out to the Minister of Rural and Remote Health, it's in his bundle of the hospitals he takes care of, not the Minister of Health. So I expect a lot of those positions, well, I'll share, but I represent people of Moose Jaw, Waccamaw, and my friend from Moose Jaw North will support me with getting as many of those professionals there as we can. We've got 100 new full-time positions and 150 part-time positions moving to full-time for high-demand professions in rural Saskatchewan. We've heard of some of the emergency rooms that are opening back up in rural Saskatchewan. Yes, there's more work to be done, but we're not afraid of putting our nose to the grindstone and getting that work done. And That is growth that works for everyone because it's Saskatchewan. And one last thing before I sit down, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Great Plains Power Station being built in Moose Jaw. Now, talking to Swift Current before, when it was built in Swift Current, the millions upon millions of dollars that flowed into the city with people renting there, staying in hotels, eating in restaurants, buying in our grocery stores. And that's not counting the 85%, I don't have the numbers, more than 80% of the people that work there are from Saskatchewan, with a good chunk of them coming from Moose Jaw. And that is growth that works for everyone. But as my whip has pointed out, I am at the end of my speech, even though I have to leave half of it out, but that's fine. So I will be supporting the motion made by the MLA from Wallshakers and seconded by the member from Athabasca, and I will not be supporting the opposition motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Prince Albert Carleton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise here in the House today to reply to the speech from the throne. It's a speech that not only about this session, but about the years ahead, about continuing to build the growth that's happening in Saskatchewan, for a safer Saskatchewan, a healthier Saskatchewan, a Saskatchewan that shows growth that works for everyone. As tradition, I'll start by thanking a few people. First and foremost, I want to thank my wife, Fran. She's my biggest supporter, always there for me. She does everything. She looks after the house, she looks after the business, she looks after everything, and she is my rock, my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. So she is my first and foremost, always. I want to thank my family as well, my son Trent and his wife Lisa and their son Elias, my daughter Angela and her husband Joe and their kids Noah and Layla, my son Colby and his wife Becky, and their kids Hannah and Miles, and my daughter Jill and her husband Greg and their kids Madeline and Lucas. And I'm very, very blessed to have such an incredible family. In fact, we hosted them at our home for Thanksgiving, and it was wonderful to have all 17 of us in the one house at one time, which normally is very, very difficult to do. And it just tells you how fast that they're growing, and because now my 13-year-old grandson is officially taller than me, and my 2-year-old grandson wants to wrestle with me. So it's great. They are so much fun there. I walked in and seen my grandson, my youngest grandson, the other day, and the first thing he puts up is, Grandpa! Yeah, and he wants to start wrestling and boxing with me. So they're so much fun, and then they grow up, and you know what? Still love them all, even though the one's taller than me. They're all just wonderful kids, and I'm very, very happy as a grandfather to have all of them as my grandchildren. I'd also like to thank Joy Schwaga. Joy's my CA, has been since 2016. Does an incredible job. People phone the office. And of course, they rarely ask for me. I can answer the phone and say, can I help you? This is Joe. Can I help you? And they say, no, I'd like to talk to Joy. And so I have to answer the phone for Joy. And it's good. I want to thank my former chief of staff in the building. She was both my chief of staff when I was Minister of CIC and my Minister of Highways, Angela Curry. She's now chief of staff to all of caucus and doing an amazing, amazing job there already. Not that John was bad, because he was good. It's just different, and she's doing a wonderful job. And so I'm grateful for the support that she gives me and that she has given me over the time. I want to thank many people at Prince Albert and Prince Albert Carleton for their advice and their support. Had a function there, a nice dinner, so it's fundraiser the other night, and we just had, close to well, close to 250 people there. So it was really nice to be able to have that and have all those people there supporting me. So that was really nice. And I want to say thank you to the Premier. And I want to say thank you to all my colleagues and thank you to the members opposite for letting their names stand and for being here and representing their constituents, because really we're only here to represent our constituents, and that's what's most important to me. And I want to make sure that they get dealt with. I don't care what their issues are. When they phone my office, we don't ask their politics. I don't really care. It's what is your issue. We want to deal with what your issue is. But there's times, there's times as an MLA where you just want to be Joe. You just want to be yourself. And I don't want to be Mr. Politician today. I'll go to a Rider game and it's just my wife and I go, I just want to put on my Rider jersey and get on the bus and jam on the bus and not be Joe Politician. I just want to be the regular guy, the average Joe. And but a story is my wife and I were riding on this bus and it was jammed in there and there was people all over in there. And this lady kind of peeks through and she says, hey, she says, did anybody ever tell you you look a lot like Joe Hargrave? And I said, actually, I get that all the time. And I didn't say anything else. So my wife says, he gets that all the time because that's who he is, she says. That's who he is. So the woman kind of laughs for a little bit. And then she says, I should just tell you, we're cousins, right? And I'd never met her before. My grandfather and her grandfather were brothers, and she's into all the ancestry thing, and so she knew who I was, and I didn't know who she was. But anyway, it was kind of funny, but it turned into one of those things. So anyway, it's very nice, and now we're going to communicate to get together to exchange some stories. So anyway, I want to move on to a speech from the throne. I heard from many people after last Thursday speech from the throne about how pleased they were with the content of the speech from the throne. I guess if you listen to the speech, you can and want to hear the positives. They're there, and I hear all the positives, and these people hear all the positives. About keeping our economy strong and growing it. About an affordability plan for people. Yeah, it's tough out there, but there's a plan. There's a plan, and we're following through on the plan. A plan to improve our health care. Hey, there's a constant demand to improve on health care, and it's not just here in Saskatchewan, it's everywhere. But we're working on that. There's a plan to improve on that, and we're doing that. Our ongoing commitment to education, there's always need for more money. I meet with the school boards in Prince Albert on a regular basis. I hear their concerns, and they hear from me, and we have a great relationship, and I understand that I carry forward their messages to the minister. So it's always good. There was a plan in there about growing and strengthening our agriculture, and a lot of that comes with having the crushing plants, having more things that our farmers can sell their products to. So that's strong. It's about continuing with the strong infrastructure that we've got going, building schools, building hospitals. Our hospital in Prince Albert, fine example. I've been pushing it and working on that since I got elected. So that's coming. Economic reconciliation. That's so important. So important. The relationship I have with the Grand Council in Prince Albert about working with them to do that economic reconciliation and to involve First Nations in all we do and in the businesses that we do. So that's so important. Supporting our most vulnerable, which are in increasing numbers, and that's just a sad state of affairs. So that we have to continue to work on that, and that's always so important for us. And making Saskatchewan a safer place. And there was lots in there about making Saskatchewan safer, because we hear lots about that. And another very important part in there, and some people will criticize and some won't, but I think it's an extremely positive thing, was about defending Saskatchewan's constitutional rights. We hear about the rights of people in Quebec. We hear about everybody else's rights, but Saskatchewan people have rights as well, and we have constitutional rights that I think are extremely important, that we have to protect, that we have we have to be out there and look after Saskatchewan and protect Saskatchewan's rights, and that's going forward in the Saskatchewan First Act. And so our natural resources are ours. And our economic future. And then we're signing the Canadian Immigration Accord, and which gives us that control over the immigration. It's all so important to us that we have our rights asserted. I mean, it's nothing new in Canada. Quebec has had that for years. And so we just say, well, we should have that as well. So it's long overdue. Saskatchewan's doing that, and this is a really good thing. So in our city of Prince Albert, we've got many great things happening, and I welcome each and every one of you to come to the city of Prince Albert and check it out, what we got going. There's the new commercial project called The Yard, and this is where the city's aquatic center and the new arenas project, there's multiple arenas going in there, potentially a total of 3 big arenas. There's hotel, there's tons of retail space going in there. Sure, stand up, whenever.
Why member is on his feet.
Some guests, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member ask for leave to introduce guest. Is leave granted?
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you for my friend from PA to allow me to introduce some guests that just joined us here today in the gallery. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to introduce the House Dr. Jennifer Beggs, this Chiropractic Association President out of Regina. I also have Dr. Mike Hornick, chiropractor out of Saskatoon, and Tracy Burtman, the Executive Director, and also my ministerial assistant, Aaron Hill. Just had an opportunity to be able to discuss the Chiropractic Association, some of the things that are happening in their area. And we do have a meeting, actually a reception later on at 5 o'clock that they are attending, Mr. Speaker. I'd encourage all members to be able to come and join us and learn a little bit more about the Chiropractic Association, and I would like to welcome them to their Legislative Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Why member is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would seek leave for an introduction.
Member asked for leave to introduce guest. Is leave granted? I recognize the member.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to join in with the minister opposite in welcoming these guests, the chiropractors, to their Legislative Assembly. I have had several opportunities to meet with them, including this year. Look forward to hearing what their particular areas of focus are right now as we go into the reception this evening. So once again, thank you and welcome to your Legislative Assembly.
I recognize the member from Prince Albert Carleton.
Well, I guess I won't have to go see my good friend Kevin Hedbed in Prince Albert, the former president of the chiropractic. I'll meet you in the room at 5 o'clock. It's in my lower back. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, there's so many things going on in the city there. This yard, which is where the new arenas, the aquatic center is going. There's a hotel being built there right now. All the lots are sold for different commercial properties. There's a number of things going in. I'm just really excited about what's happening there. And it's coming, whatever. The people there are pleased with the progress so far, so I am as well. I had a chance to tour the Rose Garden Hospice, which I've been working on for a number of years, hand in hand with the ministers of health. And anyway, it's almost done. It's down to the drywall, flooring and painting stage. And it's so nice to see, and it's expected to open up in the spring. So I'm pretty excited about that and seeing that come to fruition. And the other day, I also had a chance to tour the Paper Excellence Mill. And it's amazing. I went there a number of months ago, and the amount of work that they've done inside the mill to get it ready, to bring it back to where they can produce the pulp. So that's going to be a massive boost to the economy of Prince Albert and the whole area there, and all the foresters and everybody. So we're pretty excited about that. And I also had a chance to meet with the people from One Sky, who are putting in the OSB plant in Prince Albert. They're breaking ground in the spring, and in the fall they'll have the foresters working and cutting trees so that they can start their plant up, which they expect to start in early 24. So we're really optimistic and looking forward to that. It's a great project. We'll have some great jobs for the city of Prince Albert, and I'm very, very pleased about that. Vic's Hospital is starting construction in the spring. They'll be scratching dirt and getting things going. That's going to be incredible. The amount of construction that's going to happen in Prince Albert over the next, 4 years is going to be there. It's going to create lots of jobs. It's going to bring lots of new people to the city. So I'm very, very pleased about that. I want to talk a little bit about a safer Saskatchewan. And, we're having an issue in Prince Albert right now, and that issue is crime. And PA is home to a number of different gangs. And the gangs seem to control, they do control the drug trade and most of the theft in the city and in the surrounding area, in the rural area. And it's, it's nothing to hear, unfortunately, of gunshots in the city. You sit around in the evening, if you're outside, that you could hear gunshots, and it's pretty sad. People are afraid to go for a walk in the evening, so they're working on that. There's a plan in place. And a little story, a friend of mine owns a storage compound just on the edge of Prince Albert, and a couple of weeks ago he's out at his compound to meet some people, and he goes, and there's an individual parked there, and the individual gets out of his vehicle, comes over and holds him up and robs him with a shotgun. And not only robs him with the shotgun, but then he discharges the shotgun into the ground beside my friend there. So it was a little bit scary. And then another friend owns the Tim Hortons in the city, and one day somebody come in and with an axe. This is just a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. Come into the restaurant with an axe, and police come, sirens going, the police come and arrest them. And the next day at 3 o'clock, that same individual's back in the same Tim Hortons. So it's a situation that we're dealing with. And that's why I'm so very pleased on the section of the speech from the throne about a safer Saskatchewan, about the warrant enforcement suppression team that is being located in Prince Albert. There's a number of people out there. In fact, the RCMP commissioner talked about it. There's several thousand people that have outstanding warrants. Some of them are not, there were too many tickets or whatever, but some of them are pretty serious matters, and most of these gang people, they have an outstanding warrant. So it's nice to have that. And, the crime reduction teams, and more officers going into the warrant enforcement teams in Prince Albert, which is definitely going to help, and that's going to be, then there's the new marshals that was talked about in the speech from the throne. It's a whole new thing, and they're going to be there to help whatever police area where a problem is, and that will be their role, be it the Prince Albert Police Department, the RCMP, the Cornman Police Department, the Regina, wherever it is, these guys will go, be it the warrant suppression team, because sometimes some of the people that are out there enforcing these warrants on and arresting these people are not not easy people to do. So anyway, I'm so looking forward to that, taking full on, and I've heard from many people in Prince Albert who were listening to the speech from the throne how this is going to help deal with that. These gangs, they pick on the most vulnerable people in our society. They feed them the drugs, they feed them, and they keep them down and depressed. We're trying to deal with those people on a mental health issue and but where we got to deal with it is the gangs, and we got to get the drugs out of there, so we can actually deal with these people in the manner that they need to be dealt with. It's so hard because they're there driving them and to buy more drugs, to take more drugs, and it's a very difficult situation. So let's get dealing with those gangs. Yeah, okay. Well, I've got a couple more stories and then I'll wrap right up. But anyway, there's, some of the gang members that we're talking about, in Saskatoon or whatever, some were arrested. I know there's families that I know, the Stevenson family, for example, their son was killed by an impaired driver in 2013. and Quinn Stevenson was killed by this impaired driver. And, he was served a little bit of time in jail, then was out, and guess what? Now he's charged with murder in the Megan Gallagher case. And another woman who was driving a stolen truck and impaired, and running from the police in Saskatoon again, and went through a red light on 22nd Street. 3 young individuals, young students, coming home from track practice. She runs into them, killing 2 of them instantly, and severely injuring the 3rd. And and this gal, Cheyenne Pete-de-Truce, whatever. I mean, she's been in and out of jail ever since. And again, charged with murder on the Megan Gallagher case. And I just feel for those families, the Stevensons, the Hockeys, the Wansleys, the family of those, because they're having to deal with this all again. Those same people involved in more tragic things, and it's such a sad thing. So I'm really glad about this warrant suppression team. I'm really glad about the marshals coming. This is all going to help us in dealing with those gangs and dealing with those criminals that need to be dealt with. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd love to say much more, but I'll close by saying that I'm getting pressure to close, and that I will be supporting the motion put forward by the member from Regina Walsh-Agers, and I most definitely will not be supporting the amendment put forward by members opposite. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity and the pleasure to rise in this House and respond to the speech from the throne in my inaugural speech. I want to acknowledge that we gather here today in this legislature building on Treaty 4 territory. These are the territories of the Nahiawuk, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Today, these lands continue to be the shared territory of many diverse peoples from near and far. I and every one of us here today owe our livelihoods to the treaties signed with the Indigenous peoples of this land. I also acknowledge that I was born and raised and currently live on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. I am grateful for the treaty relationship as I operate a business on these lands and owe my livelihood to its signing. Let's not forget that we are all treaty people. In reflecting on the treaty relationship, I think back to an art history class, discussing what it must have been like for Indigenous peoples to see this building constructed on their lands. And make no mistake, the grandeur of this architectural style was chosen specifically to send a very colonial and imperial message. Since then, colonization has gravely impacted the lives of Indigenous people. Teepees set up in protest on the lawns have been made to be taken down. Mental health and addictions are huge concerns for First Nations communities. Suicide in the North is a tragedy we must address. And I am committed to working closely with my Indigenous colleagues to continue the critical work of reconciliation, further the collaboration between our nations, and encourage everyone in this chamber to continue the work of decolonization. As I reflect on the treaty relationship, I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for delivering such impactful words in the condolence message to James Smith Cree Nation. This tragic event was on our hearts and minds during the campaign. I would like us all to pay respect to my colleague from Saskatoon Centre for taking on leadership in a time of crisis. As I rise today to respond to the speech from the throne, I am honored to take this opportunity to thank the folks who helped get me here. Thank you first to the people of Saskatoon-Meewasin. I couldn't have asked for a better summer than walking Saskatoon's downtown core, City Park, North Park, Richmond Heights, and River Heights neighborhoods. This riding encompasses some of the most beautiful parts of Saskatoon. Meewasin is also home to some fantastic cultural highlights, including the Nutrien Wonder Hub Children's Museum, Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan, and the Ukrainian Museum of Canada. Over the past 82 days spent door knocking, I had the opportunity to meet so many constituents living in Saskatoon, Meewasin, and I look forward to meeting many more of you in the years to come as I work tirelessly to represent you in this legislature. Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you to my family for their support, to my partner, James Rayner, to my mother, Carolyn Teed, and my sister, Melissa Teed. Thank you for joining me here in Regina and attending my swearing-in ceremony. I wish my father, Gordon Teed, could have been with us for this occasion. I am sure he would have loved to have been involved in the election campaign and would have enjoyed the swearing-in ceremony. He liked to talk to people even more than I liked to talk to people, so I probably wouldn't have gotten very far if he'd joined me on the doorstep. Sadly, he left us too early. Thank you to my extended family and friends who have supported me unconditionally as I ventured into this new role. I want to say a special thank you to my campaign team and the amazing volunteers that came out in force. To my campaign manager, the Venerable Cheryl Lodeman, for running a superb campaign. And thank you to Stacy, Zach, Nadia, and Katie who made up our core campaign team. Thank you to the many volunteers who came out from all corners of this great province. I'm so thankful for the energy and inspiration you brought to our campaign this summer. We couldn't have done it without you, and it was such a pleasure meeting New Democrats from all over Saskatchewan. Thank you as well to my new colleagues. Thank you all for your support on the doorstep this summer. Your presence was so appreciated. Thank you to our leader for her crucial support in the last few months. Mr. Speaker, I also want to express my thanks to the former MLA for Saskatoon-Meewasin, the former leader of our party, Ryan Miley. Thank you for your service to our province and to the service to the people of Meewasin. Lastly, I want to say thank you to all the caucus and legislative staff who have warmly welcomed me in this building. After 117 years as a province, Mr. Speaker, we are hitting more firsts and making huge historical strides on this side of the aisle. I'm immensely proud to stand here today under the leadership of the first woman elected to serve as the Saskatchewan New Democratic Party leader. Hear, hear. I am pleased to stand in a female-led caucus, the only one of its kind in Saskatchewan. And, sorry, the only one of its kind in Canada. Let's be serious. And today I'm proud to take up the torch as well as the youngest MLA in our caucus, and to my knowledge, possibly the youngest person in this building. Although we have a bet on that one, so we're waiting to see. Oh. I hope we can continue to see more young people join us in this building. Mr. Speaker, rising today, I am proud to claim another first and milestone in this legislature. I am honored to stand in this House as the first openly gay person elected to the Saskatchewan legislature in its 117-year history. A rainbow stained glass ceiling was shattered in this chamber today, Mr. Speaker. I am proud to be part of a caucus and a party that continues to grow in diversity and is working to be representative of the people that it serves. There is home in the New Democratic Party for all diverse voices who want to make a difference. One comment struck me during my campaign, a comment regarding whether or not this was an important milestone. And someone wrote, even if one queer child's perspective on life is changed because we finally have representation in this chamber, then the work was worth it. And Mr. Speaker, queer kids in these galleries on school tours will finally see someone like them sitting down here on this floor. Mr. Speaker, this is an accomplishment for diversity and representation. So I want to say to all two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning folks in this province, I promise to raise your voices and advocate on your behalf. To all the diverse peoples of Saskatchewan, I can't wait to see you in this chamber. Before I look to the future, though, I want to acknowledge my past and family roots. Those roots go deep in the NDP, in healthcare, in education, and caring for people. My grandparents, Lauren Teed, an artist and educator, and Genevieve Teed, a social worker, were active members of the CCF and later the NDP, and were involved on the front lines of the Medicare fight. Genevieve worked in Tommy Douglas's constituency office and would go on to serve as the first social worker at the community clinic. The support for public health care is in my blood, and I'm very proud to carry forward my family's legacy within this party. So once again, I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance to respond to the speech from the throne. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, this is a speech that has missed the mark for so many Saskatchewan people. After 82 days on the doorstep this summer, I can tell you that provincial autonomy was not a primary concern. People question the intentions of a government that would hold closed-door meetings led by a separatist. And they had no love for vote-buying schemes disguised as affordability band-aids. Let me tell you that that tactic went down like a lead balloon. The Meewasin by-election should be a midterm wake-up call for this government. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to envision an alternate reality where instead of taking the summer off, the government was hard at work on the doorstep, listening to Saskatchewan people. In this brighter, alternative reality, after spending weeks on the doorstep, listening to concerns of constituents and consulting with First Nations, the government would have released a policy paper on how to deal with the generational affordability crisis. It would have included a roadmap and policies on how to better fund and build our education system with students and teachers in mind. It would have included policies on how to solve the crisis that we're seeing in our healthcare system, made in consultation with healthcare workers. And it would have included a plan for reconciliation and collaboration with First Nations and Indigenous peoples in our province. And then, Mr. Speaker, we would have heard a speech from the throne that laid out that roadmap about how to solve the issues that Saskatchewan people are facing. And it would have had a 10-year plan for Saskatchewan prosperity. But, Mr. Speaker, what we got was the opposite. This government has chosen that instead of addressing Saskatchewan concerns, they will muster a fight with the federal government to distract from their abysmal planning efforts. Instead of addressing health care, they are addressing intrusion from the federal government. And Mr. Speaker, this alternate reality, one where throne speeches address the real challenges of our time and plan years down the road, could be a reality in just 2 years. And that's what I'm here to make happen. Because let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, this team right here, we're busy all summer long. We were knocking doors, listening to concerns, and working in our communities. Folks are concerned about education. They're concerned about our healthcare system. They're concerned about seniors. They're concerned about the mounting homelessness in our province. They're concerned about mental health, addictions, and suicide rates. And that's what I haven't seen in this speech from the throne. On healthcare, we all know someone who's been affected or impacted by the crisis in our healthcare system, whether it's waiting hours for ambulances or waiting on that ambulance at emergency rooms because ERs are too short-staffed or too full and have no room. Or else maybe you're waiting for a surgery on a backlog. Healthcare workers are feeling disrespected and not included in decision-making. And Mr. Speaker, this is a government that pats itself on the back for privatization. The people I spoke to this summer were clear. They do not believe that privatization of surgical backlogs is the answer. And they spoke loud and clear. Privatization is never the answer in our healthcare system. On education, this government pats itself on the back for record funding of our education system when, Mr. Speaker, we know it's not enough. Folks on the doorstep were clear. They want a government that is addressing the crisis of oversized classrooms. They want a government that will commit more support in those classrooms as we continue to see diverse needs growing year after year. Every teacher I spoke to told me their classrooms were at capacity or over capacity. No one that I spoke with had a classroom size below 30 students. In some cases, it took weeks to sort out this influx of students, some teachers not even knowing what classroom they would be in until several weeks into the school year. One teacher explained how grateful her class of 39 became 32. Mr. Speaker, I think what psychologists would call this Stockholm Syndrome. This quote-unquote record spending falls completely short. And it doesn't even address the teachers who felt left in the lurch by the announcement of a centralization of a new Crown Corp directed at online learning. The throne speech mentions protecting vulnerable people in our schools. I can't help but think this is a poor response to the startling and horrifying revelations at private Christian schools around this province. Young people, many of them queer, experienced terrible abuse in these private schools. They sought leadership from this government and were brushed off. Mr. Speaker, this throne speech fails to deliver for these students, and it fails to address privatization in our education system. It's not the answer. On a strong economy and good jobs, this government has ran on a record that they are best at stewarding the economy and creating good jobs. Over the past 10 years, full-time job numbers amount to little more than 1% growth. We continue to see 4-point plans and recycled promises. In the area of jobs, I'd like to respond to the throne speech through the lens of my critic portfolios. I am pleased to be appointed official opposition critic for Parks, Culture, Sport, Tourism, SLGA, and Sask Gaming. Mr. Speaker, in one line of this throne speech, upwards to 300 to 400 people were notified that they would be laid off. This is the worst news imaginable ahead of the Christmas season. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan workers deserve better. This closure is bad for our economy and bad for revenue and bad for competition. Mr. Speaker, the revenue from SLGA last year almost pays for the government's affordability checks that failed to buy the Saskatoon-Meewasin by-election. But this is telling of this government's approach to affordability. Band-aid solutions that raise taxes and increase utility rates at a record pace. Mr. Speaker, this throne speech offers no relief from the taxes and fees and utility hikes that this government has been hitting folks and small businesses alike. While small businesses fight to stay open after pandemic closures, the government decides to make life more expensive and throw more bills at them. They extend a small business tax relief with one hand and take from the other. And this just doesn't sound logic. This is a government that over the last 14 years has expanded the PST in so many different areas that it's hard to remember what used to be exempt. Trucks, new home constructions, insurances, and in the recent budget, 32 tax fees and hikes. Apologies, 31 tax fees and hikes because they pat themselves on the back for sparing gym memberships at the last minute. It was on the flyer, let me tell you. This throne speech misses the mark on affordability, and the people of Saskatchewan are watching. In no area have these PST increases been felt more than in the Parks, Culture, Sport portfolio. Organizations in culture and sport across Saskatchewan are reeling from this announcement. Many of them struggling to recover from the pandemic will be having to charge their patrons more to attend shows. Cultural organizations and sport have been clear, Mr. Speaker, that if you can rescind the tax on gym memberships, you can take it back on their tickets and memberships, period. Mr. Speaker, this speech does little for older adults and vulnerable folks on assistance. I had the pleasure of speaking to many older adults over the past several weeks. Saskatoon-Meewasin is home to many older adult living centres and affordable housing towers. The throne speech does very little for seniors who some can't even afford groceries and they can't afford rental increases coming to them. Seniors across my riding are worried about those groceries keeping the cupboard full, and some are going hungry because of it. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, in a province as wealthy as ours. Our seniors deserve better in their golden years. The plight of low-income seniors is followed by the government's continued stubbornness to amend the disastrous changes made to SIS and SED programs, which are furthering homelessness hitting our country or hitting our cities. And once again, the government offers no guidance for its province on harm reduction or safe consumption sites. We continue to see a total lack of leadership on this file. As I draw a close, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate that the people of Saskatchewan sent a clear message with resounding electoral voice that this tired government has lost touch with the people of Saskatchewan. The throne speech does not address their needs. And for that reason, and on behalf of my constituents, I will not be supporting this throne speech and will be supporting the motion put forward by my colleague from Saskatoon Fairview. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now being 5 p.m. and this House stayed recessed until 7 p.m. tonight.